the nature of the human race is that the human race has always believed it's known everything. Even the cavemen thought they had it all figured out, and they knew everything there was to know about everything, because that's where mythology came from. It's constructing some kind of context for the unknown.
It's so dense. Every single image has so many things going on.
It's irresistible. He's certainly the coolest, most rock and roll looking god that I have ever seen.
I would have waited an eternity for this.
Hello.
Hello.
We are all live, and for anyone who's watching that from the beginning, I hope you enjoyed our new intro. I appreciate everybody giving me the inspiration to do that, particularly the Transformers clip, which started it all off, and thank you, Al, for that. That was all you.
I always need a little bit of this. Always need a little bit of this in everything I do.
That's right. So we're back after a 2-week hiatus. I'm joined here by my my co-book readers. I have Bren Crow the Voss, Max Crow the Wicked.
Oh, we froze.
Marcel Crow the Froze.
Marcel's been taken again.
All right, we have Ken Crow the Wise here, and we have Al Crow the Y. So that's just to finish off introductions.
Did you finish them off for me? Okay, great.
Yep.
I'm glad. Yeah, communications disruption can only mean one thing.
Invasion.
Dark Force is already seeping in.
Add that to the soundboard.
So today we're going to be talking about the interlude, for the first interlude, I should say, and then the first part of book 4, comprised of chapters 34 to 36, which doesn't sound like it's a lot. It sounds like only 3 chapters, except those 3 chapters span like something like 40 pages and just have so much lore. It's so dense. Have so much lore in it that I have just as much notes from the first part of book 4 as I do for basically everything else. So launching into it, we already have a comment. Hello. Well, you know what? I haven't seen one yet. Maybe Kenneth.
There is one. There is
one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be talking about it today?
Possibly.
Maybe not. Okay.
Possibly. It's a minor reference. No, not really like too big.
I thought it was later in.
Okay. I think so. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna start off with the interlude, and so the interlude takes us back. It's called what was it called? It's like Between the Wildflowers and the Weeds or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
It takes us back to Arhul Hextrophon when he's in his youth, and he's I guess a teenager at that point. It's before he goes off to school. Yeah. And he's working on his dad's basically like his, not like a vineyard, like a garden essentially, right? Because his family's basically well off. Yep. And he is tasked with, I think, destroying all the weeds in the garden. And even though, there's, I guess they have like servants to do that kind of work, Arhul is the one who's asked to do that by his father. And through that, he learns a very valuable lesson, which we will talk about. And that's the interlude. So it's basically like a glimpse into his life in the past, and also kind of gives a bit of a reason as to why he eventually joins the Rebel Alliance, and also what happens to Arhul's family. And then we're going to be talking about book 4, and I would love to explain the story for the first part of book 4, because we're going to do 3 different streams of book 4. This is the first part, but it kind of jumps all over the place. It defies explanation. We're out of the creation myths now, and now we're in like the formative myths of the galaxy, and the race is developing to the point that we know them, later on in the Star Wars timeline. Hello, good to see you, Brady. So I guess without further ado, interlude thoughts. We can go around the table. We can start with we can go Al Crow the Y and start. Go counterclockwise to Ken, and then Max, Bren, and me.
So I feel like this is going to be a hot take for the table tonight, but this is actually my favorite part of the reading for this week.
Wow.
The interlude?
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, really? I really liked it. I really well, I actually just really like Hex as a character.
Yeah.
So getting to his kind of like see his family life or whatever, that was really interesting to me. Plus, I didn't know what Starcrow was before I started this, so
Right.
I already had a pretty good grasp on who Hex was, and then Starcrow that was a little bit lost on me. So, but I really like the message. I really like. I just like his backstory. I think it's interesting. I related to him a lot. I kind of went through a similar thing. I went to school for journalism, so I know the feeling there. But yeah, I actually really liked it. So that might be a hot take for tonight.
Ken Crow, do you agree?
I think I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it is quite nice. I like Arhul's roots. I think him, despite being from a rich family, he's very humble and independent. He wants to be his own man. And the whole dynamic between his father and him kind of reminds me of me and my dad, because I know I used to work in the garden in our old house, and I used to bond with my dad over this kind of stuff. So this is kind of a personal story.
I also like how you said his roots.
Yeah,
I felt like that was like
his
a pun
root
to me because
there's
a lot of talk about
His
roots in the
roots.
interlude. Yeah. How about you, Max?
So I will say that it's also not my favorite part. I mean, that's not to say it's bad in any sort of way, because it's spectacular, and the message is absolutely superb, and it's the way it's told is so great, and it's also just another instance of Star Wars taking this really obscure character and giving them like the most in-depth backstory like possible, and that's one thing that I always appreciate about Star Wars, is when they take these really, really obscure, as they call them, glupshidos, and just expand upon it and indelibly, if that's the right word. And then also the thing I want to mention is the interlude, revolves around, the wildflowers and the weeds. And then later on in book 4, like towards the end, it also kind of comes full circle in a way with some certain plant species and stuff. So that's just a cool little full circle thing. Just to avoid any type of spoiler there. That was very vague, trust me.
Until we get to it, in which case then we're going to spoil it thoroughly.
Yeah. But also this story has like it's very kind of uplifting in some ways, like the message of it, but there's also a really tragic part in it with Hex and his family. And we're talking about it, so I'll just say the rest of them die. Okay, the rest they get killed,
Tawani style.
Yeah, and then it's that's a bad thing. That's a bad trend in the Star Wars universe. But again, it spurs him to join the rebellion, and then Mon Mothma's in it, and it's just such a very well told little story to break up the gods and ancient beings.
Yes.
Very down to earth story.
Yeah.
How about you, Bren Crow?
Yeah. So I'm gonna echo what Al said. This was one of my favorite parts of all of Supernatural Encounters. I really enjoy it quite a lot. I think it's a very touching story. And I think, honestly, it's just Joe flexing his writing skills once again. We've seen him write courtroom drama, essentially, with the historical council debates. We've seen him write a literal creation myth. We've seen him write, like, Odyssey-level fiction that is so nuanced and in-depth and complex and on purpose hard to follow. Like, I feel like that's hard to write. He's written this grandiose concept here. And then here he writes something that's touching and is personal. And it's a palate cleanser, really. Like Max said, it's kind of breaking up all of this really rich lore with this little side story. I feel like this is the most unnecessary and necessary part of the story in sort of an odd way. Did we need this? Not at all. But at the same time, it means everything to me, and it makes the story. It makes it feel lived in. And I think it's really cool that early on we're introduced to like historian Hex, right? But he's a very different character than the background character we see in the Rebel Alliance. So it's nice that this like kind of connects the dots, shows how he goes to the Rebels, really works on his background here. And in the prologue of the book itself, Arhul reflects on his friendship with Mon Mothma.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to see that brought up again here in the interlude. Plus, everything about this is so charming. Growing up, I read some Little House on the Prairie books, and the writing here emulates that like country family lifestyle some way in such a like personal way that it really connected with me. I really love it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I thought I want to talk about the metaphor that was because I think that kind of maybe didn't resonate with me as much because I'm not sure what to take from it. So I'm kind of interested to hear what you all took from it. But I really enjoyed this interlude, and I thought, you know, really, especially his meeting with Mon Mothma at the end was really cool. And we'll read a bit of that as well. But to get right into it, so this again, this happens on Chandrila, or Chandrila, which is you know, Arhul. I believe that's where he's from and where his family's from, and that's where Mon Mothma is from as well. Generally considered to be a very peaceful world. And so he is basically asked by his father to clear out the weeds in the garden. And at one point, I think it's on page 267, his father comes and he's like, well, you did like a really good job. And Arhul's like, I don't feel like I did a good job at all, because like there were all these weeds. And his father talks to him and tells him, like, basically, the weeds are a metaphor, right? And so he says, some can be plucked out relatively easily, and in those cases, only vigilance is required to ensure that they're dealt with before they grow out of hand. But others, like this kind, the weeds that grow on this property, creep in unnoticed, sprawling far and wide before they even reveal themselves. You could spend your entire life striving to eradicate them, but if you're expecting victory, that will only lead to bitterness and frustration. And so this notion is tied back to the concept of evil. It's like, if you're expecting victory over evil, well, you know, that might just lead to bitterness and frustration. And I kind of see this notion a lot in Star Wars, right? Like we have in the expanded universe, in the post-Return of the Jedi era, you have, like, you think, oh, Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie won the day after Return of the Jedi, but it's like, no, like they get into constant conflicts, heartbreaking conflicts over it. And they're in conflicts with warlords for a number of years, and then they're in conflicts, you know, with the New Jedi Order and the Yuuzhan Vong, and then with family, and then with, you know, Abeloth. So it just continues, right? It continues. And so it's like this question of like, can evil really been eradicated? So I just kind of want to throw it out there, and I'm not going to ask anyone in particular, so whoever wants to talk, like, freeform it. But what did you think of that metaphor?
I'll go off that and say, like, you know, with it also is like really symbolic of like the whole book itself, because throughout the whole book we're going from conflict to conflict to conflict, you know. So it's like the whole Star Wars galaxy is always enthralled in some sort of issue, whether it be from an external force, like an external evil, like the Yuuzhan Vong coming from outside, or something that's internal, like the conflict with Jason and, you know, him becoming Darth Kaidos or whatever. So it's like there are evils that do creep in on their own, but then there's the external forces that, you know, you can see. And then it's like when you dig up the weeds, you might have that short like moment of victory, but then the next thing you know, you turn back around, there's another conflict to be dealt with, you know. And then they mention how the only way that they would have like actually deterred it all was to just uproot the entire land and just get rid of it and just start anew, you know. But obviously that's something that, like, you know, destroying pre-established like civilizations, for say, in that like situation there. So
I kind of took it as a very direct metaphor about the Empire, because of course the Empire in Legends doesn't really ever go away.
Yeah, they're always there.
There's not really anything you can do to get rid of it. It's an idea at this point, and an idea that people are hung up on. Killing it at the, like, how do you deprogram all the stormtroopers? I'm reading through these right now. And the first book is all about Coral not being able to get over his training, his thing. I don't know if he breaks that yet. I'm not finished with the series, but you know, another good example is from the I can't remember if it's in Empire or Rebellion. Those comics bleed together for me. But
both
Luke's
of them
friend,
have quite similar stories.
Yes, and I don't like either of them very much. But
well, Rebellion carries on from Empire, right? It's like the
it's like it like can
But in that, spoilers for Empire and Rebellion. And this is actually probably the best part of both books. But Luke's old friend Tank
Yeah.
You know, Tank and Biggs already left. Is an Imperial, and he doesn't get turned back to the good side.
What's his name? Like Jan Sunbur or something like
Yeah,
that? I think. Yeah.
That's actually I like that name a lot.
Or Jan Sunbur. I don't know if it's Jan or Jan.
That was an Empire, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotta read more EU. Gotta read more EU, Lance. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
Get off Fortnite, bro.
And
It's
then,
me.
Al, going off of what you said with the Empire always kind of coming back, like symbolizing them as the weeds is like perfect because, you know, they always just come back, you know, and then eventually, like in the Legacy era, they are like the dominating power, you
Again,
know,
yeah.
so it's almost as if the weeds took over, you know, and
It's
then you have
like-
to kind of deforest the whole place again.
And
So,
to be quite literal about it, a Dark Empire, Palpatine literally comes back.
exactly, yeah.
He comes back a couple times at Dark Empire because they keep killing him and he keeps coming back. I had another clone body. Yeah.
It's like with Hydra, where you cut off one head, 3 more she'll take its place type of thing.
Exactly.
They just keep coming. I really liked with this kind of metaphor the idea that when tearing up the weeds, you accidentally tear up some of the wildflowers with it.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to me. Sometimes to accomplish good, like overall good, you're destroying some good to like get there. So it leads to the whole like, do the ends justify the means type of thing.
Yeah.
Collateral damage.
That ties into
collateral
Luke's
damage.
friend. Because I'm pretty sure he dies in Empire or Rebellion or wherever he shows up.
He
fighting
perishes.
Luke, which you know, it's really tragic. But
No, one of the few lines that I truly enjoy from the sequel series is no one's ever really gone. I do like that messaging.
That's another thing, like destroying or like in the pursuit of trying to do good and clear the land, you know, you do cause bad. It's just, you know, Anakin was trying to save his wife. Jason was trying to save his daughter, you know, but in the pursuit of that, they caused so much pain and death, you know. So
Mara, like for Jason's story, Mara's like one of the wildflowers that was uprooted.
exactly.
And he was trying to clear the weeds.
Yeah, and Jason himself was one of the wildflowers, you know?
Yeah.
And then you know, even Jaina was, because after that she's just never the same.
No.
You know? So it's all symbolic.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
And then on page 268, we have Ormond, who's Hex's father. His words of wisdom. He says, "You have to seek out the light, even if all around you seem to be in darkness. Besides that, you're not the only one fighting. Perhaps the solution is to join with others, or to recognize that battles must be fought, but the war is bigger than just you and your generation," which really ties into what we're saying here about, you know, Star Wars are carrying on through different generations, and you know, today's battles are you know, even if we win today's battles, our grandchildren or children are going to be fighting tomorrow's battles, right? And it's just a never-ending struggle of I don't know what, pushing back the darkness, right? And like pushing back the weeds. And although the weeds keep coming back, it's just maybe like this is where it kind of didn't resonate with me, because I was like, maybe the point is that there's something worthwhile in just pushing back the darkness, or pushing back uprooting those weeds, even if we never fully eradicate them. Maybe that's where the value lies. Maybe that's where you know, true good lies. Yeah,
can I jump off on that for just a second?
Go for it.
That actually that ties into the Dark Times comics, at least for me, because those comics, they get really dark, obviously, in the title.
Yeah.
But there is sort of an element, especially towards the end, of like fighting to do good, even though you know you'll lose, is still worth doing.
Yes.
And
yes.
Especially, you know, the last like couple arcs, the arc where with the Masamitas, where Dostoevsky kind of figures like, even if I do lose, it's still worth trying. It's still worth trying. It's still worth the fight. So I actually think that's spot on.
And again, it goes back to Yoda Dark Rendezvous, where Yoda says, like, take away everything, and what are you left with? Your choices, right? So maybe the value isn't actually making that choice, right? And what do you choose? Do you choose to be good, or do you choose to be evil? In this wider sort of Manichaean metaphysical kind of sense, it's like, you know, are we good, or are we evil, right? If it's like a kind of dichotomy between the two. And then Arhul, he says, so evil can never be rooted out, not truly. It'll be with us forever. And his dad says, I don't know about forever. there are evils that are so deeply entrenched that none can root them out. Well, perhaps only the Supreme Maker can, right?
Mhm.
But then I wonder, and maybe we're getting into the weeds instead of the wildflowers if we start talking about this. But how can we value good, or how can we know good if there is no evil with which to compare it against?
Mm.
Mhm.
Wow, that was profound.
Well, I mean, in the sense that
That was good.
maybe that's why evil can never be fully eradicated, because
The whole yin yang type of thing, right?
Yeah.
we would have nothing to know really what constitutes
No
good
metric of comparison
Mhm.
without evil to show us what we should value.
When they
right.
say, the existence of the light, and dark is like a thing. Like one can't exist without the other. So,
Right. And
light's past shadows,
exactly. And if we all have free will, and again, this is kind of like it doesn't have to be a monotheistic worldview, but if we all have free will and we have this choice between good and evil, if no evil exists, then really what choice is that at all, right? Because we're just constantly just choosing good, but it has no value because there's no other alternative, is what I'm saying, right?
Exactly.
So I mean, like now that we talk about it, it makes more sense to me from that perspective, and I like it a lot more than I did just reading it on my own and having these thoughts kind of kicking around my head. Ken, do you have any?
Ormond is such a sage. This is like the Yoda of farmers.
Yes.
Like, I really connected with this guy. I could have had a whole novel just about Ormond going around like giving advice to his farmhands. Like, honestly, I really connected with this character. I thought he's such an easygoing character too, just like a salt of the earth type of character. You know what I mean? He's just so likable, so amiable.
He says
the kind of guy you just want to hang around with,
For sure. I wish this guy was my dad, just peddling out with like,
I want to have iced tea with him on the porch, in a rocking chair.
Exactly.
He says it's a Southern Belle story.
Like it's a Southern Belle story.
The Southern gentleman.
Nice mint julep to go along with the.
He says at the end of page 268, he's like, if you'll put up with one more piece of advice for the day, never stop asking questions, seeking truths or challenging narratives, especially if the narratives are the status quo. Always remember the old saying, those who forsake truth for power often use power to conceal the truth. Like, wow, that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. I think that Ormond definitely is a sage.
Absolutely. He might
Hello,
as well
Harry.
Gandalf.
Thanks for joining us. Ken, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Ooh, I'm just gonna go into a real world comparison about like fascism and like, okay. There's been so many dictators throughout history, right? Like we have Adolf Hitler, we got Stalin. Like, where does it end? When is this world gonna stop having these bad people? And like, you have to always keep watch for these kinds of people. They come in, but like these people come from nothing. Like Adolf Hitler was literally an artist before he became the ruler of Nazi Germany, and like, you have to just watch for these things, and like,
and it continues to the present day.
Exactly. And then like
right now.
And like, you know what? I was thinking of like the July plot on Hitler, and like, sure, Klaus von Stauffenberg was a Nazi, but he was doing it because he wanted to see his country like flourish. He didn't want to see his country in any more ruin. And like, okay, you kill this guy, but at what cost?
Right.
How long before you lose a part of yourself doing this?
Right. It goes back to that Nietzsche quote. It's like, those who fight monsters should beware that they don't become the very things that they're fighting. Like that's just a very kind of paraphrase of that quote. We have a question here. What are you questioning, Matthias? Let us know in the comments and we'll see if we can answer it.
We can find the question together.
Then at the end of the interlude, before Hex has his little chat with Mon Mothma, we find out that Hex teams up with Han Solo and Chewbacca.
Yes, I thought that was interesting.
That's like my favorite trope in all of Star Wars is Han and Chewie just show up and save the day. It's unrelated.
Just show up.
Because Hex and his family get captured by Zygerian slavers.
From the Clone Wars.
Clone Wars, and Han and Chewie come and free them. There you go. Han and Chewie come and free them, and then the issue is though that the Zygerians return, and then they kill Hex's mother, father, and sister. So Ormond, his mother Igraine, and then Lycium, his sister. are killed, and Hex has to now live with the fact that his family was killed, right?
And sort of partly the blame is on him, arguably, as well.
Yeah. Blames himself for what happened. Then he has a discussion with Mon Mothma, and that's sort of like right at the end of the interlude. And I actually wanted to just throw it up on screen so that we could take a look at it. So he's talking to Mon Mothma here after he joins the rebellion, and they're sipping tea, not mint juleps, but tea. Can you read us from "You're hinting at old prophecies," that second last paragraph?
You're hinting at old prophecies. Arhul thought back wistfully to better days. So did my father. But how do you reconcile your belief in the Maker with violence? I don't do so lightly. Mon Mothma's gaze reminded him too much of his father's. He had understood then why he had that look. He did now. I've examined this from every angle and cannot see another way. Nevertheless, we risk becoming another empire if we are not cautious. It is for this reason that I am wary of others who hold only vengeance in their hearts. Such ones have no regard for the collateral damage they do. If we are to be different, that must be what marks us as different. If we're to clear the garden, we must learn to distinguish between the wildflowers and the weeds.
And there you go. That's it. Roll credits. That's the that's why this interlude is called "Between the Wildflowers and the Weeds," right? And it's funny because it goes back to Hex's conversation with his father at the beginning of the interlude. So it kind of like closes the loop, right? It ties it together.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I don't know, like, does anyone have any thoughts on this conversation between the two of them? I thought it was very powerful, very profound.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yep. Very.
Oh, okay. No, nobody has anything else to add. No,
Yeah.
we all just agreed we liked it. So
yeah, it was good. It's a good message.
It's
good little story.
Great capstone on the interlude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mon Mothma is a character that pops up so much within the expanded universe, but is a character that ultimately I feel is slightly underutilized still at the same time. I'm not saying that we should have a trilogy of like Mon Mothma novels or anything, but like she's always like kind of like a side character, right? And here she's really profound here, and it really feels in character for what we know about her. And they always talk of her in such a loving, respectful manner, as Mon Mothma is regarded as being wise as well by so many characters within the EU. So I think it's really great that her characterization here is just something extra to show her wisdom, to show like her kind of empathy, I guess. I think it's really important to see that, because we don't always see that within the EU. We hear about it, but we don't always see like Mon Mothma being the leader we're told she is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you see it a little bit at the beginning of Jedi Academy trilogy when she's like, Luke, so how's the Jedi Academy going along? And he's like, humming. Would you like to get on that? He's like, oh my god, I procrastinated.
I'll have it on your desk by 5, Miss Mothma. Anyways, it's funny because they're having a conversation about the Supreme Maker, and I was like, oh, monotheistic Mothma. That's what Mon stands for. I should have known. So before we get into book 4, we will take our own interlude and answer this question. I think, Brennan, I don't want to answer for you, but I think you're taking a Discord break right now, so you're not on Discord at all.
Yes, sir.
So, we'll see. Hopefully when you come back, then you can answer Lance's question. But just to clarify, Brennan has not been on Discord in, I don't know, like over a month now. So so now book 4, we get into the Cosmic Wars. There are 3 Cosmic Wars, but we're going to start with the Empyrean War.
Oh, what a great title.
Wars. Yeah.
Oh.
It starts off with a quote by Jedi Master Damian Holt, which I will throw up, and we can also take a look at that. Actually, there's a couple quotes, but this was the one that kind of stuck with me, so that's why I'm throwing it up. It might be a little small, but it says, next to the fabulous forces that rose and fought and crashed, mankind was but a mass of tiny, frightened grasshoppers, hopping about beneath battling colossi. Yet one must remember that it was those very same grasshoppers, embittered, insane men, who first unleashed all of the ancient terror upon us, reigniting an age-old cosmic feud to flare out in galactic war, planets struggling with planets in titanic combat, immense, unthinkable. To me, what this says is, humans can influence the world around them, right? In very significant ways. And it's funny that, really, I think the humans, at least for the parts that we're going to talk about today, have kind of taken a bit of a backseat in the Empyrean Wars, but very much are, as this says, the catalyst to everything that happened, right? Because it's this kind of fear of humans that this outside force that was introduced into the Star Wars galaxy by Tlotny, that's really caused these conflicts to heat up and generate between, on the one hand, the ancient powers, the evil guys, basically, right? And then on the what else are they called? There's like 7 or 8 different names for them. There's many names for them, but
yeah,
the bad guys essentially. And then on the other hand, you have you have the architects, right? The children of Wutzek, and so those are the two sides, right? And Tlotny has made Gorog, or Thar Gorograt, her did I do that right? Thar Gorograt, her general. And so Gorog is sort of the first chapter 34 starts off with Gorog marshaling forces for the architect's side to fight off these ancient powers, the evil ones. And the Celestials, the 4 Celestials that created the Sky River Galaxy are kind of just chilling, watching this all unfold, which we'll talk about. Thoughts on book 4? We can start, and we'll talk about generally your thoughts. Generally, we can start with Bren Crow and make our. But I should say why our names are all Crow the something. It's because there is a character named Starcrow the Wise, or Starcrow the Wicked, depending on who you ask, who is featured prominently in what we're going to be discussing today and in future chapters. Yes, there is a story by Michael Brennan called the God Form Assumption of Starcrow the Wise, which I strongly recommend checking out. It's done in the style of an epic poem. It's sort of an in-universe document. It
is very good.
Yeah, it's the Empyrean Wars with the Bedlam spirits versus who? So the ancient powers,
the emissaries of darkness, pretty much.
Yeah, the emissaries.
The Eldritch powers.
The Eldritch powers. It's called the enemy with a capital E, essentially, right?
It's so great. It's so Lord of the Rings-esque.
I know. I love it.
I think we're eventually going to find out. I mean, spoilers, but the immortal gods of the Sith are really the driving force behind this enemy, and specifically the Father of Shadows is. So it's basically the forces of the Father of Shadows, to use a very broad sense term, versus the Bedlam spirits, or otherwise known as the architects, and the old ones, like their children, Typhagem. We talked about them last time. Typhagem, Gorog,
Now.
And Now's kind of doing his own thing. We're going to talk about him a bit too.
He was banished. He's just he's
chilling
doing
somewhere
out there.
It was a very interesting exchange with Splendid App that we're going to be talking about. Hello. So general on the first part of book 4, Bren Crow.
Oh man, it's so good, right? It's dense, but it's, as I've heard everyone repeatedly say, it makes book 3, which book 3 felt like going from book 1 and 2, which were really awesome, easy going, smooth sailing. Book 3 felt like, oh my gosh, this is a lot to take in. And book 4 somehow manages to shift into a higher gear that I didn't think was possible. Just becomes more complex, more in-depth, more convoluted, which I absolutely adore. I found myself absolutely loving, specifically in book 4, the hex notes, where it will randomly be oh yeah, this is another name for this and this and this. What other Star Wars book establishes that there's multiple names for species or planets or what have you, deities? And it just makes it feel so sprawling. It makes it feel like a great canvas. There's so much there with just these little hex notes that are oh yeah, so-and-so is also known as this and this by this person and this person, and these people call it this. It just makes it feel so, I don't know, just so in depth.
It makes it feel more authentic too, because in our own world there are multiple names for different things, right? And different factions, different peoples, different nations, and that kind of thing, right?
History is very convoluted in and of itself. Our own history, whether dates, nations rise and fall, right? And it's very much emulated here. There's so much to love about this. I specifically really love when we get into Thralls of the Endless Night. That's probably my favorite part of book 4, which I'm sure we'll talk about quite a bit. You get some Starcrow stuff in there, and you get a really, really cool like fantasy-esque story that reminded me of like the Brothers Grimm, some of their stuff. It's very like horror, but also like fantasy. It's just so good. There's a lot to love here in the first Shadow. And yeah, I just really, really enjoy it. There's no complaints for me for this stuff. Although reading it late at night, my eyes did get a little heavy during some of the long paragraphs with some of the long lists of aliens.
Well, we'll get into that too right after we hear from Max Crow, Ken Crow, and Al Crow. Max Crow.
So book 4 does absolutely take things up a notch. Like book 3 is a beast in and of itself, but book 4 is just something entirely. And like just the amount of stuff that's in here, and just like from chapters, like just these 3 like chapters that we're talking about today, right? It was like 3, right?
Yeah.
So there's just so much
I know
packed into it, and it's insane. But there's just so many cool things. Like we're seeing like these gods like actually like in action. We saw them born, and we saw like how they interacted and stuff, and how they influenced the galaxy. But now we're seeing them like get down to it. We're truly like in the era of gods and ancient ones. And there's so many cool little references to things in Star Wars, to things in the new canon, to things in other franchises. We've already had the Ahsogians, like, E.T., and so many other things, but there's just so many other like little things in there, and it makes your mind explode. And, I've got like 2.5 pages of notes for book 4 that I am so excited to get into. And then there's just so many things from TCW mentioned, and things that enhance further things like in the EU, and just, it's so much fun. And, it makes things like the Rakata Empire look tiny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ken Crow. We're talking like cosmic now, right? Like this is on a huge scale.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Ken?
I think book 4 so far, it's my favorite. Like, of course, there's one thing that we are probably not going to cover on this stream. There's one, like Max said, there's one connection that I was just like screaming about. And I was like, oh my God, Joe did this. He really did this. And I can't say what it is, but
this time. You can't say what it is.
I can't say what it is this time, but it blew my mind. And I was like, there's no way. Because I was thinking about it. I was reading book 4. I'm like, what if so-and-so shows up in this book? I'm reading at first, I'm reading the chapter. I'm like, okay. And then I do a double take. I'm like, huh? Joe mentioned what? He mentioned who? And I was like, oh, okay. I guess in my mind, these shall not be named now are canon to the EU, but I have no words. It was just a great connection, and of course, everything else in the book is absolutely fantastic. The architects getting down to brass tacks, fighting wars, causing chaos throughout the galaxy, the immortal gods of the Sith, Starcrow, but that one connection that Joe did.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I remember.
You should have seen the text messages.
Yeah, he messaged us on the Discord. Oh my God, I can't believe this. And I was like, I don't think we're talking about that chapter today.
Makes me want to re-download Discord right now.
Resist the temptation, my friend. Al Crow, anything to add?
I think Ian's covered most of my. For me, a lot of this was starting. This is where it's starting to get real complicated. Yes. I'm definitely gonna have to engage with the discussion here, because there are some things like Starcrow. I didn't know what Starcrow was until about a week ago when Yin started talking about it in the chat. So a lot of the things went over my head. There were a couple of nice retcons that I liked. I think I have in here, and a couple nice little shout outs. Like I think the very first one, like on the second or third page of this chapter, the flesh boars from Boba Fett Salvage or Boba Fett One, which is like my favorite Boba Fett comic, or one of my favorites.
Nice.
So that was nice to see. But yeah, dance, obviously, of course.
It's so dense.
So dense.
I've got going off what Al said, like, mentions of things. I have notes on that too. So
yeah, I'm gonna pull up some lists. What I will say for myself, book 4 was a bit taxing. It was amazing, but there was a lot of lore, and there were a few times where I felt a little out of my depth. I will not lie. There are many lists in book 4 of names, and while I thought it was necessary, because again, this is like a foundational text, I will say, and you're going to see lots of names in the foundational text like this. I just thought it was a lot at some points, and so I had to read it over. Even though it was 50 pages, it wasn't like one sitting. I had to read it over the course of a few days, and I took lots of notes. I appreciate that there is the tie-in to Starcrow, because I think it enhances the work, and the way that it's tied in just makes so much sense in the context of the work itself. But yeah, I mean, book 4 is do not tread lightly. There's a lot going on, and I was lost between the wildflowers and the weeds when I was reading book 4.
You really get a sense for the scale with all these lists that are like you said, necessary, but also taxing at the same time. And it's so rewarding though when you recognize one.
Yeah,
I'm gonna throw one out.
A couple of times when you're like, oh, it's this. It's rewarding.
To return.
So go ahead, Al. While I get this ready. Yeah.
To quickly return to my analogy from the first panel that I was on, like if we're midway through the Empire duel, this is the part where Darth Vader starts throwing things at my head and cracks me right in the face.
And you're disoriented. You're like trying to swing.
And it just keeps hitting me.
Yeah, that's definitely how I felt sometimes when I was reading this. I think by the end of book 4, we'll all be expert.
Thrown out the window.
Well, then that maybe. But if we're not thrown out the window, we're all going to be expert philologists and etymologists. Yeah. So here's one of the first lists. It's of the architects, many invaders, conquerors, and traitors that fought in the cosmic wars. These are but a small sampling. You get,
yes.
There are certain things that jump out at us. I don't know, Max, if you had, I see like Yinkori, for instance, Shevin, all these races that we already know, the Deshade. But then I see like stuff like Yukin and like Grisk right there in the middle.
Yes,
also Tholian. Is Tholian is that like
Star Trek?
A Star Trek,
like a Star Trek. Okay, anyways.
Wow. It's a Star Trek reference.
Yeah, I thought so.
I believe it's expanded upon a little bit later on.
Like the Tholian web, right? If I recall.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the Tholians are more complex than that. I believe the Tholians were also mentioned in some Battlestar Galactica tie-ins.
Wow. Okay.
After first being in Star Trek. Because I was reading about this online the other day, and now they're kind of here as well. The Tholians exist across multiple franchises, kind of thing.
Yeah. Are there any other names that jump out at you? We see the Rakata there.
I think this is a little before this block, but on page 272 it mentions the Filer Nitsons.
Yes, we can go from West End Games. We can here. Yeah. I got that. I can pull that up for you. Give me 1 second. Stop sharing.
Talotny also it says that she summons the colossal wasps, which like the Tales of the Jedi ship that we see hollowed out.
Filar Nitsons. See that right there?
Yeah, the Filer Nitsons. And it says that they're to protect other space. The black holes were guarded by Filer Nitsons, which makes so much sense. Filer Nitsons are literal sentient gaseous clouds that roam around with red eyes and all green clouds from West End Games. What else would be guarding other space, honestly, other than sentient clouds with red eyes? It just makes so much sense.
The most
And-
normal thing in outer space.
Essentially,
Yeah.
what happens here is in the beginning of the chapter 34, Splendid App, he opens up a whole bunch of portals, including, I believe, the Endor one, as well as the Hell
Yeah.
Hoop portal to other space. So they're like, or Eleutherian. So they're basically like he's opening up like fronts with which they can wage this war against the ancient. Yes, we get it, Lance. Thank you. It was very good. We appreciate it. It was on brand for what we're going for. And then of course like Gorog also like uses Typhagem, right? And Typhagem, he has like the Zothians, and then I guess we find out like the Yevitha go to New Zoth, which becomes N'Zoth, right? Like in the Black Fleet Crisis, and it's kind of cool to see that like etymology. It's like New Zoth becomes like N'Zoth. It's like the word kind of degrades to the point where it's like N apostrophe Zoth. I just like seeing stuff like that, like words develop over time.
Yeah.
I already mentioned in a previous episode of this series the Erythros, their name evolving, all of like you said, all of this stuff gradually like losing letters over the aeons. It's great. It's consistent too. So like every time I find a new word now, I'm like trying to figure out what could this turn into. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then I'm going to share now on the enemy's side, and this is if you're still watching Darth Sidious, this is why I called them the ancient powers, because that's, or the ancient ones, because that's kind of how they're referred to. And apologies, I know this is a little small. Yeah, no worry, Al. I just saw your note. I don't know if you already did it, but in any event, the maddening prelude to battle, the ancient ones set loose into the Sky River, demons of the charnel worlds, who have been genetically engineered in the horrid chambers of Viscera by the dark powers. They're basically, I think, the sort of general term for them is the Rosum, right? But then we see so many things here that, like, kind of stand out. Like I see like Rathtar from I believe episode 7.
Yeah,
that's where they first show up.
Yeah.
Sarlacc, Gundark. There's a reference to Tarask, and I know the Tarask from Dungeons and Dragons. It's basically like a giant Godzilla-like lizard creature. It's like the most powerful creature in D&D in the 5th edition Monster Manual. So, I mean, it's like stuff like that kind of stands out to me. And of course, these are like on the side of the ancient ones, the dark powers, as we call them. Oh,
there's
perfect.
Also, they mentioned the Rogwort, which is like General Grievous has a pet Rogwort in TCW in the episode Lair of Grievous,
which
is subsequently
Fisto.
It's subsequently killed by Kit Fisto and his friends.
One of my favorite episodes.
That's a good episode. I always love seeing Kit Fisto in action. That's my boy. So
I think they throw out. Is this where they throw out Mantelian Savrip? Because that's if anybody remember back to A New Hope, the thing that kills Chewie's piece on the hollow board.
Yes, that's a Mantelian Savrip. Yeah,
Savrip, yeah.
In Dejarik.
Also here we got ogres, which ogre could mean several things within Star Wars. We have several ogres, but one notable ogre we have is in the Ewoks comic books. The ogre that guards the desert land of Zendor on Endor with the Zendor Rockers and the Rainbow Bridge in issue 1.
Yeah. There's also a reference to the Zendor Rockers in book 4, I believe.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Isn't there also like Coruscant ogres in the underlevel?
Yes, that's the other one. The Coruscant ogres are like mutated. Those were featured in the Geltong War. The Coruscant ogres were mentioned there.
That's right, they were. That's right.
Aren't they also mentioned in Jedi Academy? No, Jedi Academy trilogy? No. There's like Jaina and Jason get separated and they get hunned by like a beast or something, right?
Yeah, I think that's a Coruscant ogre. Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
They're also in I think the Jedi what's it called? Jedi Twilight. Michael Reeves trilogy. The name of it is slipping my
Coruscant
mind.
Knights.
Coruscant Knights. Why was I calling it Jedi Twilight? Yeah, Coruscant Knights.
The first book.
Yeah. There's a Coruscant ogre in there.
There is also a mention of a Kintan Strider, which is another Dejarik piece, the one with the club.
Oh, okay. Wow, look at that. I didn't even catch that one.
And then there's a Wampir, it says. And then they are now known as Wampas, which you can see down in like the hex notes down there.
Yeah, we see the origins of the Wampas. We see the origins of the Gorax, which is the creature from the first Ewoks movie.
That's right.
Yeah.
We also got a Marvel Comics reference with the Snowgar, or those hairy savages on the ice world that are like primitive, and they regard technology as being almost like deified.
Yeah.
Oddly. And Boba Fett's involved in that issue, I believe.
There's also a reference to the sapient planet Phase and the malevolent bacterial hive mind called the Hole. And I don't know anything about those things, but it sounds so amazing that I just want all the stories on those things. So, I mean, we could sit here and talk about all their different references, all day, every day, but we're going to just rely on Brennan's breakdown videos for those.
I also want to mention among those species that it mentions, it says that like there's other nameless like entities that are in it, like disembodied tentacles and amorphous beings, like designated slugs, and then like they say there's like a light emitting demon. Like
yes, the light emitting demon. There's a lot going on.
It was really cool on the good guy side when it revealed the architects, the people on Team Architects. It mentions the Yamri and the Kalish. Yes. Being on the same side. They later have a huge war with the Kalish Huck Wars, right?
Yeah.
And so it's so cool to see them like fighting on the same side in the ancient days before they have their battles later on in the timeline. And we also got the Abu Garte from Dark Empire comics and the Lamproids, which the Lamproid is in
the Mos Eisley Cantina.
Yep.
You have the Lamproid, yeah.
One of the craziest stories ever.
Yes,
it's like my favorite story. It made me cry in that story. I don't care. I said it on stream. It's like one of the few things in Star Wars that it's made me weep.
It's amazing. I love that story. That was
It feels so out there. I love it.
I want to touch on the little Grisk mention just to connect it. I know all of us are not like the hugest new canon people, but it's just cool to see things.
Timothy Zahn created the Grisk, right? So,
yeah. I haven't read those books. I have not read them. So I only know kind of surface level things about the Grisk, but I just think it's cool that it's like, hey, y'all took things from the EU, so let's take a little bit from there and put it in here. I love it.
It's like do unto others as they would do to you, right? So you cherry pick us, well, I'll cherry pick you.
Take the little things in there.
Steal from me, I steal from you.
An eye for an eye, as they say.
Yeah,
an eye for an eye.
This was a tough story.
Tooth for a tooth.
The Tales story where Rudge's girlfriend. Don't remind me.
Oh my goodness.
So there was one interesting thing. It's mentioned, I think, on page 274, but neither the architects nor the ancient ones could take away a being's free will. So there were some races that were kind of on either side, but decided to do their own thing, defect, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's this notion that, there's no slave races here, so to speak. I mean, not at least not mind control.
Yeah.
Right. Like at the end of the day, they have free will, and if individuals are able to escape and kind of do their own thing, in some cases, like whole races are able to escape and kind of do their own thing. Like we have mention of Godels. Godels are supposed to be, I think, on the side of the dark powers, but they end up kind of escaping and doing their own thing. I just pulled it. There's a few races mentioned, but Godels were the ones that stuck out to me.
Can I name one more species? Oh, go ahead, Al.
No, you probably saw the same thing I did. Go ahead.
I don't know if we did. It was one thing that I was going to mention previously. Listed amongst all of the species that are on the side of the enemy is the Yunu, which the Yunu comes from the Ewoks picture books. Feature the Yunu, which the Yunu looks similar visually to the Gorax, but that wasn't established. Well, on page 274, it mentions that the Gorax is a type of Yunu, linking them for the first time in Star Wars, which is interesting to me.
That's
and
cool.
it's cool. The Gorax is so scary. So, of course, there's an army of Gorax for the enemy, right?
Yeah. Ken,
Hmm?
was there any species that you caught or found particularly interesting?
Ooh, I'll have to go back and look.
Just a quick aside: in the neutrals we were just talking about, one of them is the Philordy.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a take on.
It sounds
I don't know if
a
that's a
little
take
similar.
on the he who shall not be named. I wonder if that's an existing species. 'Cause if not, that's fun.
Lordy.
I was
Philordy.
waiting for someone to mention it. I didn't want to be the one to do it.
Oh no, I'll take
Rathars,
that.
definitely
Hey,
interesting.
why, thank
Taking
you.
stuff from canon.
Yeah, Rathars.
Raftars.
And then
yeah.
are the Wampir? Sounds familiar.
Like
Yeah.
vampires? Yeah. The Wampir.
No, he said the Wampirs.
The Wampirs.
Oh, they become the
The
Wampas.
precursors,
Yeah.
the precursors to the Wampas.
So I thought you said vampire. I was like, yeah, that's
Oh,
vampires.
vampire.
It kind of sound like
I mean, that happens later in book 4.
Yeah.
Happens later.
Moving on, I think there's a sub chapter. It's called Bella
Bella
Siderea.
Sidera?
Yeah, Bella Siderea, which is Latin for Star Wars.
Wow.
Yeah, if you didn't know, I looked it up because I actually took Latin in undergrad.
Interesting.
Yeah, one of my.
That's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I took it in.
That's
took it in
like a
university.
sign of the times, where it's where he's just dunking on the audience, just like, this is funny.
Pig Latin.
In moving on from the list and starting on page 275, we get into what we had talked about earlier, where Niall is having a discussion with Splendid App. So we find out that Urdril and Niall are sealed in other space, essentially. And Niall, when he's speaking to App, he says, "Here, I'm just gonna throw it up and see if Ken can read it. It might be a little small, but we'll try."
Okay, I have my book right here, so I can just tell me where to start, and I can read it.
I think it's on. It says. I think it's on page 275.
Mm-hmm.
It says floating over to Splendid App.
Here we go. Floating over to Splendid App in the form of a stellating star in neon. Its center circle turned into an Apollyon gasket with which the 6 eyes surrounded a maw of many teeth. He said, Oh, radiant Apu, what aberrant appointment do you depart?
That's a great voice.
I love it.
What is it you seek from me? App replied coldly.
No great thief, my bountiful appellation, merely Apu's passage to a densely populated world. Why, great Borgamon, do you hesitate in bestowing me my rightful appanage? Mayhaps you concern yourself with uptight matters, now that you have expunged yourself of a certain appendage.
Very nice. So, as you can see, Worm Tongue. As you can see, Nal is that's Nal is a very interesting character. He's like, what was it, like cancer, essentially, cancer cloud.
Floating cancer.
Yeah, floating cancer cloud. He's basically every adjective he used to talk about Splendid App, he starts with the word app itself.
Yeah.
Appendage, Pokemon,
Apparator.
He doesn't stop.
No, he doesn't
He keeps
stop.
doing it.
He's such a
Appendage.
troll. He's
The
such a
The
troll.
pull of trolls.
He uses apriorism, apoplectic, apsu. So basically, he has like a battle of words with Splendid App. Well, now you know.
I love this. Isn't really a connection or whatever, but I feel like this ties back into a very minor theme in KOTOR 2, in Knights of the Old Republic 2. Wishing to experience a higher state, he, Splendid App, removed a part of himself that was no longer deemed useful. Apathy. If anyone remembers, apathy is death.
And that's interesting because Nal says that's the reason why Splendid App. Well, because Splendid App's like, I can just go back in time and like unmake you or something like that.
Yeah.
And Nal is like, no, you can't do that because you removed apathy from yourself, and therefore now you like would feel bad if you did that. Essentially, that's like very, very broad strokes of what he's saying to him. But he's basically saying like, because now you feel things, you will not get rid of me. And so he calls App on his bluff. But essentially, I think what Nal is trapped on Mortigan, it says, but he leaves like parts of himself in Illuthurian, right? Like a contingency plan.
And is Nal's going to continue to be a absolute menace and like impossible to destroy as we continue on through book 4.
Yes.
like an impossible infestation of cockroaches that no matter how many times you try to exterminate it, it's just still there.
Yeah. And that's really like what he is. He's like an infestation, right? He's an abomination. Yeah. When on page 277, we learn about the 4 different factions of the Firstborn Council, right? There are the Resolute, who are the faction that's loyal to the Celestials, and they don't want to break the bond that the Celestials made with them, right? They want to like keep the peace. Then you have the Judicious, who are determined to fight any and all galactic threats. They would also be known as the allied races. So they're the ones who really want to let's fight the humans because they're a scourge, or let's fight these ancient powers, right? They're the ones who
want to
join up with Telotny's crew and actually fight back.
They want to go like root out evil and not wait for evil to come to them. Yeah.
Then you have the renegades who forsake all former familiar bonds to join with the enemy forces. So they're the turncoats.
Yeah.
And then finally the renunciates who chose to withdraw from fellowship with all others. They're like, they're neutral, not taking a side. They're like, we're just leaving. You guys figure it out. We're doing our own thing. At this point, we find out that the Quoth, eventually, the Quoth were the ones originally that Telotny had tricked into giving Infinity Gate technology to humans. They learned that they were duped. They are ashamed. They rename themselves the Qua and resolve to somehow make amends. You find out the Gree. We lost. Ken Crow's back. But essentially, like, we found out the Gree basically were like, what did you guys do? Like, why did you share technology with the humans? And then we also find out that at this point that the Asogians are part of the Resolute, right? They're the ones who want to like keep the faith with the Celestials.
Yeah.
And the Asogians are the ones who say like, hey, we have a plan. We can figure this out. Like we want to grow something or do something. But it's going to take a while for our plan to come to fruition. No pun intended, because they are basically botanists. And the Judicious, who we're told number 30 of the precursor races at this time, decided, no, like we're not going to listen to you. We want to construct our own weapons, our own defenses, and they want to ally themselves with their offspring races to fight back against the evil.
Can we assume that the Resolute still have their immortality because they've not broken the bonds with the Celestials?
I think that's a fair assumption.
Yeah.
So the Asogians are still presumably immortal at this time.
Yeah, as we had mentioned in previous streams, I think like even last stream we talked about it, that the Firstborn that haven't given up their innocence essentially are immortal, right? Like their planet's can be destroyed and everything around them can be destroyed, literally like the clothes off their backs, but they will not be harmed.
Yeah.
The sandwich in their hands, gone.
That was Alishon.
Yes. Moving on, so we have basically like a Tower of Babel moment. I don't know if you caught that on page 279, where Telotny wanted to fuel division and create chaos. She saw to it that the ancient precursor language spoken by the Judicious, Renegades, Renunciates, and her own forces would change to different tongues. So now they can't talk to one another anymore. Then we get a very, very interesting, and we were talking about this in our group chat, a very interesting breakdown of where basic comes from, universal, right? So first we have this, we were told that the Rosum, that's sort of that catch-all term for the races that the dark powers use. They escaped into the galaxy. They used Urkitat, which is, I believe, what the precursor to the Sith language, or is it the Sith language itself?
It is like the Well,
Sith
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Sith language.
Splendid App brings Apiru into the galaxy, which I believe is Hebrew, because it's mentioned in one of the footnotes that Apiru script appears on Darth Vader's chest. And as we know, there's Hebrew script on Darth Vader's chest plate in the movies. So I'm pretty sure Apiru is supposed to be Hebrew. Okay. Hello, thanks for joining us. Catch up so that you can actually join us. There's also Universal, and we find out that Universal, it's a complex trajectory of Universal and Basic down the ages was touched on by Dr. Melinda Vorgan, Associate Professor of Xenolinguistics at the University of Charmath. So basically, I think it's not explicitly stated, but the idea, Max, we were talking about this, was that humans brought Universal, which basically becomes Basic, into the galaxy.
Yeah.
Right.
From the human exodus.
Which we can then assume and infer is why we can understand the characters in a galaxy far, far away who speak English.
That's right. And it says Aurebesh came about from the need to have a common script. Once the Wukarian philologist Nysinioff adopted it for use alongside Basic, it spread until it became ubiquitous. So Aurebesh is, of course, the Star Wars script that we see in the movies. But then you also have something called High Galactic, right?
Yes.
And High Galactic, if you look it up both in the expanded universe and also in the new canon, is the Roman alphabet. It's like our script that that you see on the screen in front of you.
Yeah.
And
that's why we have like X wings and B wings and A wings. I get that question all the time on my Instagram. It's like, why is there A wings? Why is there these letters in Star Wars? And I'm like, well, you see, So I also it's incredibly narrow-minded to think that like in this vast, humongous galaxy, there's only one language and only one alphabet. It does, with the various species, you don't think they're gonna have their own text and scripture. Like
that would be a great retcon for the B wing. It'd be to just be like in Mon Cal, that's what a bee looks like.
Yeah,
because I've never seen the bee in B wing, to be honest. But
so how the wings, like how that, and then it goes this way.
Yeah.
So if you go like this and connect,
if you add the circle,
I just never. I've seen it, but I just don't see it. Like you feel
like
what I'm saying?
it's not as apparent as the X.
Yeah, that one's always been a stretch to me. That's it. That's all I've
only Star Wars fans are going to question why there's an X-wing and a Y-wing and a Z-95 headhunter. Only we're going to be like, wait a minute.
This is the book for them. And what's funny is like sometimes I hear some criticism amongst the various social media communities that I'm a part of that like, why did we need this explained by Super Extra? It's like, what are you talking about? Star Wars fans want everything explained.
Exactly. I actually got into that argument with someone literally the other day. They're like, why do we need to know all that? And I said, it's just the nature of a Star Wars fan. We want to know things. And they're like, but we don't need to know like, this, and that. And I'm like, I want to know.
And yet at the same time, Supernatural Encounters does it in a way where it's still blurry somehow.
Exactly.
Well, it keeps the mysterious aura around it while also like peeling it back, but also furthering questions, furthering its mystique. And it 100%. Does so in such a great balance that I think is like impossible to strike, but somehow Joe Bongiorno managed to do it.
I'm gonna connect this to the interlude where Ormond says, "Never stop asking questions and never stop being like curious." And we are never stopping our curiousness of the Star Wars lore and the mythos.
Well, I mean, this might sound a little bit. This might be a little bit harsh, but like if you don't want the mystery to go away, then look at this. Look at this. You don't got to read this. This is huge.
If you don't have to read it.
No one's putting a gun to your head.
Exactly.
I feel like at the end of a school year, I'm always like, well, I'm not going to remember any of that. And I fear that at the end of this book, I'm going to be like, well, I didn't retain any of that. I'm going to have to go back and read it again.
Rewatch these streams.
Take a course on
this.
Yeah.
It's like
you can take a course on this. Yes. You could take it definitely.
Oh, there could be collegiate
I had
academic courses.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there. I had an old lady when I was reading this at work ask me what I was reading, and I was like, if I tell her, I'm just gonna like turn her into dust. She's gonna incinerate in front of me. And then she was like, "Oh, is that for a course?" And I was like, "Oh no." I was like, "No, this is just for fun." She said, "Oh wow."
Man, I wish I had a history book where there were people on the front shooting lasers out their eyes. Plant woman, like that's a history book.
I mean, this is a history book, isn't it?
Yeah, it really
very much so.
I ain't getting credit for it.
I too wish I had a history. Maybe in like 1,000 years we'll have history books with like lasers coming out or whatever. I don't know if this world doesn't destroy itself. So I actually wanted to return to this, Harry. So I'm glad you brought it back. We're identified as common Sith in the written word.
The hyperspace story, the written word.
Yeah, they roughly translate into. I've seen according to footnote 55 in Supernatural Encounters, his deeds will not be forgiven until he merits. Which I think is a kind of like on the nose reference to Anakin's eventual redemption.
Yep.
Yeah. It's kind of weird that he like wears that, but like I don't know, whatever.
That's what I was about to say. So interesting. So interesting that he would wear that. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he was just like, put something cool on my armor.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's like a.
You can interpret. I was going to say, hold on a second. I was going to say, but you can interpret this as like a dark meaning too. It's like his, he will not be forgiven for like the death of Padme until he like really becomes a powerful Sith Lord or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So it could be interpreted in the more sort of negative light anyway. Either way,
that's probably how he would have saw it.
Yeah.
If he didn't know what it is, it's like Americans with the trend of getting Japanese tattoos, not knowing what they mean.
Something completely different.
That's way funnier. That's my version. He's just like, oh man, that looks really cool.
What it means, dude.
Like, what the hell?
What were you going to say?
I was about to say.
Go for it.
Same thing as Brendan said. I was just about to make a joke, just make a wisecrack at Darth Vader's expense.
So we see what is now referred to as High Galactic was a resurrected ancient lingua franca used by the elites to set themselves apart from the common folk. And so maybe that's why, like in some of these in-universe documents, you see like Leia Organa or Mon Mothma or Garm Bella Bliss, like they sign their
signed
names
in English.
Yeah, signed in English.
That's a good call. Yeah,
they're using High Galactic, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, very interesting stuff. I really liked how it, again, that's why I said we're going to be expert philologists at the end of it. It really delves into, where basic comes from, and doesn't explicitly tell you, but you can kind of connect the dots yourself, right? Because it says like basic spreads as humans spread throughout the galaxy, right? Is anything else anyone wants to say about that before we move on? About the languages or anything? Okay. So footnote 56 was the reference to the Xandor rockers, Brennan, in case you wanted to, it was on page, I believe, 280. We get a reference to the cosmic turbines at this point, which I believe were created to overcome, they were created by the architects to overcome the eldritch techno-organic vessels of the enemy. And the cosmic turbines, of course, come up again. It's in the Third Great Schism. I believe is it like Arcania or something like that? It involves Arcanians, but they're basically scholars of millennia hence thought them to be merely ancient starships, but they caused the firstborn to shudder, for they remembered them as old machines that reaped souls, set loose monsters, and transported slaves and gates across the galaxy. So these cosmic turbines are very powerful. And they're created to, fight the enemy during this Empyrean War. We also see that there's a reference to the fighters of Ashla, which were fighting on the side of the architects, which include, Wookiees, Tals, right, offspring races.
And they're collectively called the Jungle People, which is pretty cool.
Yes, this is a very insightful comment.
They also mentioned the Gagorans, which I think they might be somewhere in the EU as well.
Yeah, from West End Games.
See one. Yeah, we actually see one on screen in the new canon.
Rogue One, right?
In Rogue One, there's the big furry white guy who actually I do believe appears in Andor as well. So that's cool. And then there's also a couple other species in here. I just saw it and I might have lost it.
I'm gonna throw it. I'm gonna throw up another screenshot here. Go for it.
They mentioned the Lasat in this list here. The
From
the
West End
Lasat,
Games.
Yeah, and also in Star Wars
And
Rebels as well.
Rebels, yeah.
With Deb and his species, which is really cool.
There's
I believe
also
that's in the list that I threw up. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
There's also the Yuzum.
Yes.
Joe Yowza. Singing his heart out. And there's the Yurashu, who are from West End Games. They're basically gorillas. There's the Tempestro, which is flying lizards from West End Games. He pulls so much from West End Games. The Fiorin, like Nim. Oh man, I just love this section so much. The Cragmaloid elephants from Wizards of the Coast.
Also, did you see the Drakh, the reference to the Drakh from Planet of Twilight?
From Planet of Twilight, yeah.
The Navuta bees make their triumphant return.
Their return, yeah. The Triani, cat people.
So at this point in the
Shistavanen are also mentioned.
Shistavanen, that's right. In this at this point in the narrative, basically Telotny and Gorog, they're throwing waves against the enemy, right? So the first wave is, of course, the fighters of Ashla that I mentioned and all those races that we're mentioning. The second wave are the Colossi of Ilithurian, and then the third wave is again, more races, the insectoid and arachnoid races that are being thrown against the enemy, and we don't really see a lot of the fighting, right? It's more of like a tell don't show kind of thing. It's more inferred, and I think sort of like the fighting is beside the point at this point. Like really we're here to learn about sort of like who was involved, like who the players are in the overarching narrative. But I just love that like one of the insectoid races that's thrown against the enemy is the Navuta bees. It's just like
you could write so many books like set within Supernatural Encounters. About just all of these different battles. I really would love to see it.
It leaves the door open.
I also have this in my notes and as well on the gargantuan races that are sent against the enemy. We have giant rancors. Everybody knows what a rancor is. Nibre were like these kind of like space, like almost manta ray-ish type monsters. They were featured in Clone Wars. They mentioned star dragons and Purgle, which the Purgle are the space whales that everybody knows from Rebels and stuff. Then they mentioned the Zillo Beast.
The Zillo Beast, I know.
Clone Wars. I love that because the Zillo Beast is so cool because it's just a big lizard that's lightsaber repellent.
It's just Godzilla practically in Star Wars.
I love it.
That's right.
So that's cool. I love that. I love the Zillo Beast mentioned,
especially since in the Clone Wars they're like thought to be extinct. So if one caused so much panic as we saw in the Clone Wars,
bunch of them. Oh my!
Imagine an entire species of them.
Wow. Splendid app riding out with his sword on a
Zillo Beast. Oh man.
Oh boy.
So as the narrative goes on, we find that things are kind of falling apart, right? Like it says here at the bottom of page 281, as seemingly endless demonic things alighted on cities of their choosing, declaring themselves emperors and emissaries of the gods, the firstborn council, that's the council of the firstborn races, right? The elder races, was overwhelmed, and their inability to provide relief to so many afflicted sectors caused resentment, dissension, secession, and scattering divisions. Many begrudged the renunciates for hiding or destroying their technology so that the opposition might not use it, while the resolute came to be looked down on for refusing still to take up arms and protect their kin. Yet for all the rogue factions that came about, many sectors were yet left to their own devices and forced to fight or seek help wherever they might. So, that's pretty grim. And then it's like later humans would join the fray on both sides of the conflict.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
We are literally just wild cards. I love it.
Yeah. So at this point, we get what I would call the petition of the dreamers. I believe they're called the Great Ones of Onericor, right? The Dreamlands come, and they petition the Celestials, which leads to a very interesting discussion. They go to the Celestials like Wutsek, Zers, Maruts, and Luxos, and they say, you guys need to intervene. I say guys in like a very good sense of the term because I think one of them is actually like female. But anyways, doesn't really matter. They're celestial. They're probably genderless to a large extent. But like you need to intervene, right? And then Luxo says to join in warfare would be to break the eternal decree in defiance of the supreme maker. And they said that to protect against the cunning of the dark powers, the Valdalar, who I believe are another form of celestials, have raised up a noble line of benders, Mondo Shawan, or Mondo Shawan, and other guardians enhanced by the wills. So that like it's like proto, almost like that seems like Jedi, right? Like it's like almost like Jedi Knights. But like the Mondo Shawan is a reference to, I believe, the fifth element. There's a race of that called of that name in the fifth element. And then you have benders, and I was like, is that like a reference to like Avatar? So like you have basically people who can command elements and maybe command their natural surroundings, but they're also given like items like the eyes of clarity, rings of light, distaffs, flaming swords, gilded helms, elder signs, and other enhanced crystals, amulets, and objects. So like this is like now become a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Like they're given like various weapons of magical of magical properties. But it's really cool because there's so much potential to set stories in this era, right? Like you have all these things, and there people are being elevated to fight back against the dark powers.
One thing that struck me in this section is despite this being very fantasy-esque, this is very Star Wars to its core. What I really like about this is that they're trying everything to not join the fight.
Right.
Star Wars, wars in the stars, right? That's what it's all about. And that's not what was intended for the galaxy by its maker, is what we're told here. And yet they do everything they can to try to stop it. And then we're just seeing it further spiral into wars. It's inevitable. They can't stop it. And I just thought that's really interesting.
Yeah. Also to kind of go off that is in like the Yuzan Vong, you kind of have the two factions of like Luke's side where they're very much more reserved. And then you have Kip Duron going out and just fighting everyone, That's like, the Resolute, and then the I forgot the name of the ones that are.
Yeah, Luke's the Resolute and the Judicious are like
there it is.
Kip Duron.
So I like that. It's really
that's a good point.
It's a cool little theme that kind of continues throughout.
That's sort of like in the Old Republic era. Revan would be the Judicious, and then the Jedi Council before.
Yes. Maybe the Resolute.
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
It rhymes, yeah.
And can I prevail on you to read us a short paragraph on page 283?
Where are we starting?
Had our offspring. Because this is like, I read this and I was like, oh man, there's like parenting advice in here too. I was like curious.
Yes, Anduin.
Okay. Had our offspring listened and learned, said Woodsec, they would not be in this predicament. We have given much, but they are not infants. It is not for us to shield them from the consequence of foolish choices.
And like I think that really resonates for me as a father. It's like you can only do so much. You can give your children the tools to be successful and to live a good life, but really today, like sometimes the best teacher is for them to make that mistake, and you can't shield them from that. You can't protect them always. You can't. It's the only way that they grow and that they learn is by again. Experiencing the consequences of their bad decisions, right?
Yeah,
you can tell them blue in the face. Like, it's like my daughter. I remember she like mildly burned herself because I said, "Don't touch that! Don't touch it! You're gonna burn yourself." But she didn't listen to me. She burned herself and like never touched like that thing again, right?
Yeah.
First. So it's like it's the only way that you learn sometimes, and you hope that the consequences aren't so grave that they can't come back from it. But at the end of the day, like sometimes experience and letting them fall is the best teacher out there. So this resonated with me personally.
Yeah.
Right under that we get a reference to Anduin, which is really cool. And then there's so many times in Supernatural Encounters it mentions Mad Titans. That always just takes my mind to the Purple Man of Marvel, Thanos. And it just there's repeated mentions of Mad Titans within Supernatural Encounters, and I love the imagery that those words evoke.
then of course we have pretty significant Lovecraft references. On page 283 we have the Plains of Leng, the Peak of Ingranek. These are specific. I mean, like Plains of Leng is like Plateau of Leng is very ubiquitous. Like you hear it a lot. But like these are specific references to the Dream Quest of the Unknown Kadath, which is a novella written by H.P. Lovecraft, and it takes place in the dream world. And these are of course the dreamers, right? They come from Onarikor, and so it makes sense that they're referencing these locales in the dream world, right? It's like it's all connected, right? I really thought that was cool. And then on page 284 we get what I believe to be our Babylon 5 references. You get the Vorl and the Zado, so the Shadow and what I think are the Vorlons, right, which are two major factions in Babylon 5. And I'm a huge fan of Babylon 5, so when I saw that, I kind of like flipped my lid. I was like, this is amazing. There's also a reference to the unseen realm of the Celestials, which I think I threw it out in Joe's server. I was like, is this like akin to the Judeo-Christian concept of heaven? It's like, yes, but like in the Star Wars context, right? Not necessarily in our own world. And then what is perhaps my favorite reference so far in Supernatural Encounters, there is a subchapter titled Deceive, Inveigle, Obfuscate, which is a line said by Dana Scully in the X-Files when she's calling out what, like basically the government forces are doing. They're deceiving, inveigling, and obfuscating the truth. And I saw that. I knew what it was exactly because it just like burned in my mind. And I was like, oh my God, there's a Scully X-Files reference. And this is the best. I don't care about anything else that I've read so far. That's all I wanted to see in the Star Wars book. I was curious if anyone else like caught any references in these 283, 284 that kind of like jumped out at you.
I didn't, so you can skip over me.
Okay, that's fair enough.
The Selegians were mentioned at some point. So there's some Urus.
Yes,
around.
That's right.
I forget. I lost them here, but they're in here.
Or if I could look like one species in Star Wars, I'd look like Uru.
Oh, yeah.
This is amazing. I'm also a huge X-Files fan. It was the X-Files and Buffy were like two shows that really got me into watching television and serialized television specifically. They were like the formative shows of my youth.
I forgot that he has his own timeline website for X-Files. I knew that at one point. That makes so much sense.
I always try and like rewatch it, but it's a big undertaking. I need time. I need more time because it's 9 seasons. Well, I guess 11 seasons, but I don't really care so much for the reprise. On page 284, though, we get into the discovery of hyperspace, specifically by the Biff and the Duro, and we also
which we knew before, right? That was pre-established.
Yeah, we also get a bit about moon cloning. And also, I think that there's a reference to the tale of the Iowa pod on page 285. Did you catch that, Brendan?
Yes, I saw that. That was amazing. It's
Maxine would have just read because she just read that story.
In Tales from the Primal Age.
That's right. Yeah.
It was like a 1-pager, almost like 2-pager.
Yeah.
Camino creation myth. Sorry, that's what it is. A Caminoan creation myth, essentially.
I also want to point out, being a huge Moon fan, it says the Moon would prove most successful in this endeavor, introducing a technocracy under the interdimensional beings. The interdimensional beings being the aliens in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones, number 4. As George Lucas so aptly put it when Steven Spielberg contested against the idea of aliens. He said, oh, well, then they're not aliens. They're interdimensional beings. And now here we are.
Yeah.
Interdimensional beings.
We're going to talk about the interdimensional beings in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull because there's more references there.
Oh, yeah. They just keep coming the further you get into the story. Sorry, Max.
Sorry, it's okay. But like they look kind of similar, the moons and the interdimensional beings. So maybe there was a little bit of intermingling there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't worry if we're all talking over each other because we're all very excited about this.
Yeah. You know me. I like my moons.
For sure. You are moonier than most.
You are our resident Darth Plagueis expert.
That Moonier Than Most was a reference to labor pains.
Moonier Than Most.
Moonier Than Most. Brent Crow, you were about to say something.
Yeah, so with the Iwapod reference here, we get a different name for the godlike entity that is taking up the seas.
That's right.
He's called the Dark Titan of Ilitharion, which is a great name for him. I can't remember his name at present from the Tale of the Iwapod.
I don't have it. Yeah.
He's the great Leviathan, pretty much. Max is going to get it.
I might be able to look it up too, because of course
first.
You might get to it. It's a race now.
Protas.
Protas.
Oh, Protas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marcel narrated that story. So if you want to find out more about it, go back through his readings. It's one of his first ones.
It was the first time I ever used special effects in a reading.
Shout out to Tales from the Primal Age. Peak.
Well, I mean, I think it makes a certain amount of sense, but no, fair enough. I think if you read it in context as opposed to just a summary, it might resonate better. I know that sometimes reading summaries, there's a bit lost in the translation, but I mean, again, this isn't going to be for everybody, right? Like sometimes some there are going to be some decisions made that aren't going to really resonate.
There's a couple that I'm not a big fan of personally.
Yeah.
You know,
I have a couple myself, but on this particular, this is one of the times where I have the opposite opinion. I think it's a lot better because, man, that's a lot of convergent evolution. I know I bring that up every time, but it drives me crazy.
And we talked about that last time, Al. You talked about convergent evolution and sort of like the issues that we had with it, but or at least like sort of notionally without actually having read it. But I think that the way that the work unfolds, it works within context. And I'm not just saying that to try and like get you to read the book Ghostfish. It just I do think that it makes a bit more sense when it's fully expanded upon, as opposed to something's kind of like lost in the summary a bit. Maybe that's just me, having been like indoctrinated into the cult of supernatural encounters that I'm saying this.
I think,
but I do think it makes more sense in context.
In summaries, you can really lose the tone. I think, which is probably the most important aspect of a story, is the tone of the story. Is one of the most important parts of any story, really. And so with summaries, you lose the tone that has been established. You lose the atmosphere of the story. Like reading a Wikipedia summary of like the life of Darth Kaitis. It's going to read like one thing, but it's going to read completely different when you're reading the actual story.
That is true.
Because
100%.
It's all within context of the tone.
I love that Ghostfish brought this up because he says, I tend to favor convergence over separation. I think that's a really important discussion to be had, and maybe we don't have the time for it today. But I do think that like it's like, where do you draw the line? Like, what's the balance between convergence and separation, right? Because convergent evolution, maybe you can go overboard with it, right? Like some people, it might be too much for some. It's like, oh, this is like too artificial, too on the nose, right? Everything is connected. That it makes sense, but at the same time, it doesn't really resonate with me, or it's too cute. And then there are other people who think like, well, I think that none of this makes sense. Like it should all be kind of separated. So it's just interesting that discussion. Sorry, go ahead, Al.
I think it's definitely a much more fair point to be like, well, the dragons should be separate. I think that's fair. But for me, humanoid species, it just drives me crazy. I'm like, every single one is a humanoid species. Every single like intelligent species is a humanoid. I know because in real life these people have to wear costumes, and we can't like give them 7 limbs or whatever. But like, just saying, that's a lot of convergent evolution. It's so much.
It's a bigger issue with the repetitiveness of humanoid forms in Star Trek, but so much so that in Next Generation they had to literally explain it in a whole episode where they explain why the humanoid form is so prevalent across the galaxy. That literally becomes a point of contention for Star Trek fans, which just why on all these different planets across the galaxy is there like people who like, this one has a pointy ear, this one has a dot on their nose, this one has a horn on its
and then in the Next Generation they explain that, and
exactly,
some people hated that episode and some people loved that episode.
For me, I'm not the episode itself. It's hey, whatever. But the idea, I was like, oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh yeah, I love the idea to it. Yeah.
episode itself.
It's
For sure.
interesting with all the different species kind of coming together and discovering it at the same time. But I don't know, it meandered a little bit.
What's interesting about on page 285, we get not only like the iropod reference, but we also get like the creation of like the reticulans, the gray aliens, and like sort of like how maybe they, people come to conjure up these abduction stories, because it's like the Abinishai were sent to spy on the core worlds, but most were sent forth on occluded missions across the vast universe to abduct, probe, and psychologically enervate their prey.
I was literally about to talk about that. Yeah. That's so interesting.
There's also this reference to a pure black virus, and I almost wondered if that was like the black ooze from the X-Files, which if you ever watch that show, it's a prevalent thing. It keeps coming up, right? The aliens kind of infiltrate and possess people through this black ooze.
Maybe it's the black goo from Prometheus.
It might be the exact same thing, right?
In the big head room.
Humanoidism is just really a convenient optimal mimax. I feel almost a more metaphysical origin. The Force likes this shape is better than pure divergent or convergent evolution. That is very cool as well. I like that. See, Ghostfish. I mean, get caught up, and you can join us.
That's this. That's what you just described. Supernatural encounters. That's why I like it, because it's not convergent evolution or divergent. It's made. It's built.
Intelligent design.
Yeah.
Or maybe not so. I didn't say a benevolent design. Sometimes it's malevolent design as well.
Or inept design in a few instances.
Inept design, such as the Jebi, was one instance of that. That was literally mentioned earlier in Supernatural Encounters, how it was just made for like kind of the heck of it, They're just like, well, we might as well make this.
Like they were just like bored one day and they're like, let's just create like the weirdest thing we can.
Let's just
see
create.
where it goes.
I mean,
let's
is
just
that
create
sort of
an
Waru?
alien.
No,
Yeah.
It's just big meat.
no
meat
Waru slander here.
I'm not. This is not slander. I'm just saying.
It sounds like slander to me.
I'm just saying. A meatloaf in a protective shell. That's pretty weird.
Well, didn't Splendid App put that protective shell around him?
That's true. Yeah.
That's some fancy meatloaf.
I love this comment. Intelligent design by a guy named George and some costumers. That's right.
ILM.
The Supreme Maker. So page 286 and 287, there's a ton of references to there's Indiana Jones references, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Jurassic Park, like we get a reference to the InGen Corp and the Megalodon clone, which is Jurassic World, I should say. The Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull references we're going to get into, and then Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I think it's at the bottom of page 286. After psychically drawing them, a group of humans gathered upon a mountain appropriately named the Tower of the Devil, awaiting the arrival of the aliens. The Xantar played a musical refrain. Dun, 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 dun. I totally butchered that, but it's the Close Encounters musical refrain. You can go listen to it yourself. As a greeting and invitation to come aboard, which they subconsciously understood. After the humans had boarded, Kathir, those are the aliens, closely monitored the object of Kathir is actually, I believe, the interdimensional being. It's the same person, right? May also be Zahar, the immortal god of the Sith.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Closely monitored the object of their obsession, this son of Hender, and we can talk about the son of Hender because that's, I believe, a reference to. Alien Exodus by Robert Sawyer.
Cosmo Hender.
Yeah.
Oh, Megalodon is a shark. Oh dear.
But it's just a very large shark.
Is that where the Meg comes from? That makes sense.
That is exactly
The Meg,
yeah.
Yep.
The Meg 2, go watch it. I know that's unrelated, but it's stupid fun.
I just want to say,
Working at a theater, we don't have it anymore, but you can stream it probably somewhere.
There will be options, right? For people to get physical copies, which we can talk about as soon as we have more information on that. So fret not. People, I think, will eventually get physical copies of Supernatural Encounters.
It will be available.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to go back through the PDF because every time we come across a big thing of names, I'm like, I wonder if I missed a Transformers reference in there somewhere. Because I don't recognize all those alien species.
There's got to be
one.
somewhere.
Joe, you got to give me one.
about willing to trade two Heart of the Jedi's for one Supernatural Encounters. Yeah. So let's get into the Henderson. So I kind of traced it. The son of Hender. So Cosmo Hender is a character in Supernatural. In Alien Exodus.
By Robert J. Sawyer.
By Robert J. Sawyer, which everybody should read. It's in that Tales from the Primal Age collection that Maxine's holding.
And you can read it online on the author's website as well.
Yeah, for free.
Is it robertjsawyer.com, I think?
Sorry, yeah. And he has the first 2 chapters as well as his 10,000 word outline of what it was, but what it would constitute. But Cosmo Hender, along with Corellia Antilles and Paxton Solo, are humans that are brought into the Star Wars galaxy from our own world, essentially.
Which ties into
and I think that's brought into the Star Wars galaxy. Cosmo Hender is his descendant, which leads a slave revolt because there are a bunch of races that are enslaved by the Varl, which are like the proto-Hutts.
The original Hutts, yeah.
He leads a slave revolt.
And that ties into THX, the proposed 38. Thank you, Max. From George Lucas. And it also ties into, doesn't it tie into American Graffiti as well?
Yes. So Cosmo is said to be a descendant of Curtis Henderson of American Graffiti.
American Graffiti.
That's where the son of Henderson comes from.
And that was George Lucas's first directorial project, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. It's also a biblical Exodus allegory, hence the name. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So Cosmo Hender is said to be, I believe, and Dale Hender by extension are said to be related, their ancient ancestors of Anakin Skywalker, and by extension Luke and Leia.
Yeah.
Because basically the son of Hender, as he's described in page 286, 287 of Supernatural Encounters, is the chosen one. And there's this idea that it's like, well, you know what, we don't want to wait for this prophecy to come true on its own. We're going to actually bring the chosen one here. So the son of Hender is essentially like abducted and brought, into the Star Wars galaxy, as I understand it.
And he uses the Force to float, and this gets the name Skywalker is derived from this.
Yeah. So I believe the Xantar are the aliens from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They're the smaller aliens. And then the Kathir is that alien that you see like right at the end of the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull when it like merges. Because there's a reference to 13 Kathir, and I think in that chamber where
there's 13.
There's 13 corpses that become one alien, right? And kill. Oh God, I forgot her name. The
Spalko.
Irina
Spalko.
Spalko. Is there any Heart of the Jedi references in Supernatural Encounters? I haven't seen any yet, but we're still very, very early days. The Hutts themselves, Rakatan slaves. Yes, I don't know that Alien Exodus itself is necessarily being made canon to the EU, but there are elements from it being taken and put into. So I don't know that slave revolt idea plays out as it would chronologically.
It's a big galaxy, and there's also multiple pocket dimensions that are being created left and right by these Celestials.
So it could have taken place.
It could have taken place, probably, in one of these pocket dimensions, probably. Or, somewhere. It's a big galaxy, right? And historical chronologies in our world are muddied. So it can be muddied there, too. The timeline might not be exact,
Yes. And then there is, of course, I believe a specific Indiana Jones reference. God, I'm trying to look for it. It's about an archaeologist.
It's like right at the end of 287.
Oh, okay. Notwithstanding their good intentions, their attempts at stealing the skull of Zahar, so that's the crystal skull, or even abducting the archaeologist who would later recover it, ended in failure. So I think the archaeologist who would later recover is, of course, a reference to Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm. Which Indiana Jones will be heavily expanded upon in a later place in the book.
I can't wait to get to this, Harry. I'm reading it sort of like in bits and pieces because I want to adhere to the book club. So I don't know what you're talking about yet. So I appreciate that you're saving it. Zahar, also known as the Lord of Deception, the interdimensional being. There was a footnote. It was footnote 60, mentions the Altrusians, which I think is a Land of the Lost reference, which is a television show from the 70s. think it was remade into a movie or something like that. But I just remember the television show. So that's kind of cool. I thought, it's again bringing in some other things from the world. Like it's everything's in Supernatural Encounters. It all matters. So there's page 286 and 287. I was talking about these two specific pages with one of the editors, Supernatural Encounters, Corey, and it was just like reference upon reference and like interlaced references, and so it was just sometimes it was like too heavy for me it was just too much for me to understand sort of like what was referencing what, and so I reached out and I was like, please put me out of my misery, but I ended up actually figuring it out for myself while I was waiting for him to reply, and it's funny because it's like. I want to figure these things out. I'm sure the rest of you guys do too. But at the end of the day, I also want to, sometimes I feel like I need some help.
Sometimes you are like, do I progress the story or do I spend 30 minutes on Google? You know what I mean?
Right. Maybe that's for like the reread, all the areas that.
That's what I'm finding.
That's for Brennan's breakdown. I'm going to wait for that. So then on page, is there anything else that you want to talk about, like Indiana Jones references or Zahar, the Crystal Skull? Anything else that kind of stuck out to you?
Oh, good. Well, actually, there was one little minor thing. Not, well, they do think Son of Hender is like a chosen one.
Yeah.
So, and then they also mentioned chosen ones throughout on 286. So it's like multiple chosen ones. Like.
A lineage.
Not the only one, yeah.
That's right.
So, and then going back to our very detailed discussion on the Chosen One prophecy from the previous streams, it could be anybody. It could, as I interpreted one part of it being like Alana could be a chosen one, or Leia or Luke. I really like that because like each generation has to have a hero. And that's another thing, going back to the interlude, how they mention how future conflicts are the next generation's battles, like they are going to have to rise up and fight it. So it's like, of the Clone Wars era and like all the way up to his redemption, like Anakin was the chosen one for that time. And then for the Yuzon Vong, it was Jason, defeating Onimi. And then for the parts, sorry, I just want to finish this one. For the parts of the EU that we haven't seen, Alana was the chosen one,
That's
so
right.
I think it's really cool.
You could argue that Cade was also the chosen one of his
exactly
time
Luke and Leia in Dark Empire as well.
And, I mean, like there's obviously like different chosen ones, but I really like this. I'm just gonna read it. We just mentioned earlier regarding the answers to questions Star Wars raises. It's a tricky thing, but Harry loves that Supernatural Encounters gives answers that can also raise more questions.
Yes.
So to me, to him, it never demystified. I agree with that. I think it's insightful and important to.
That's the title of my favorite Riddler story ever. Questions multiply the mystery.
That's right. And this goes back to what Al, you were saying, I think in a previous stream, and even on this stream, like, why are there humans in a galaxy far, far away, right? Like, this was a question that you also had. And of course, Kate is, we knew that. That's why you look like him.
I think that as someone who really loves having a detailed chronology, like I've been making my own EU timeline since 2019. And I love like mapping it all out, knowing this goes here, this goes there. I love getting answers. But like with all of the answers that Supernatural Encounters gives, like you said, there's more questions raised. And one of the questions that I have is like, and a question for all of you is, how much do you consider all these other franchises to be a part of the Star Wars universe now? Because as someone who loves to like write a detailed timeline, I'm now like, do I add all these other universes to like, you've got to watch all of this and read all of this here? Because like, how authentic do you consider it to be to Star Wars? Do you consider it to be coincidence? Maybe this name is a coincidence that it's the same as this, or are there all these dimensions? Is it all connected? Like, what do you guys think?
So, for me at least, it's not not quite coincidence. Maybe you could head canon it as, Telotny sees these things in other universes or in the primary universe or whatever, and it's like, well, I'll put that in here. I'll create something like that in this one.
She's
If you
seeing
wanted,
into other universes.
if you wanted to go that route, or you could just say this thing happens to also exist here.
Yeah.
Just and I, you don't have to say, because I think in one of the issues of Star Wars something or another, Hellboy shows up for like a cameo, and that's really cute. But like, do I want Hellboy in Star Wars? That's a little weird.
Don't worry, Harry. When Brennan and I interview you, we'll get your views. Hopefully by then I'll be done the book, so it won't influence mine.
I'm hoping to finish the book before like we interview the editors as well.
And I mean, for the most part, Lance, like I would say, like many of them, that's how they're presented, right? They're presented as sort of East. Like if that's how you want to take them, then I don't think it would be invalid for you to do so. For me, I think they're just like, new doors to new worlds, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that like everything happened the exact same way it did in Babylon 5, just because they're Babylon 5 or Battlestar Galactica references and supernatural encounters, but it means that like things like that could have happened there. Right? This is like such ancient history that it's like, it's really, it's hard to say, but it's like anything could have happened, right? And it's like, and really like maybe that's not even the point, right? The point is more that like these things can exist within the universe, right? It's the never-ending story, so to speak, right? What's that? I forget. There's like a line from the Neverending Story. I'm sure it'll come back to me like later on. I'll be like, damn, I should have said that on screen. It was so profound. But in any event, we have. I think we're probably, just for listeners, we're probably going to try and go on for like another 30 to 40 minutes. So if anyone has to drop off, like feel free to, because we're getting, I think, into the meat and potatoes of this part of book 4, Starcrow.
Oh yes.
Which you see it start on basically page 288 with the prevaricators of Pax, right? We get introduced to Catel Khan, and they were told there's an annual convention of human leaders. What's it called? The Plenipotentiary Plexus.
Great name.
Yes. And we're introduced to the Sethans, specifically Lord Nile, right? And at the same time, we're introduced to Princess Lorna of Alderaan, I believe, right? And how she, I believe, is wooed by Lord Nile, and when she joins him, I believe on, is it his world that she joins him on?
It's
where she goes
moon.
The moon, okay. The vanished moon of Alderaan, is that what you're referring to? No. Okay. Because she goes and visits the Solu, the Solu, the Sol EU, the Sol EU, is that the Solu? And she gets I believe she's told of a prophecy by the shaman, or shamaness. Basically, don't get together with Lord Nile. This world has been tainted by a great evil. You should return to your own while there is yet time, before the seed is planted, before the shadow spreads, before the Seth line grows. Right? That's the foreshadowing there.
This is such a dark fairy tale, isn't it?
Yes.
They are very much so.
They are a real species.
I would also like to mention how
you're free to do that, man. I mean, it's a free world. It's all good.
We also meet in the first Thralls of the Endless Night section, Prince Jarkai, which is the dual wielding of lightsabers that forms Jarkai. So that's just a little cool thing, and I'm sure we'll see that develop later on in the book.
Doesn't he become Emperor Jarkai at some point in here? I remember
he does, in the aftermath of it. We'll probably touch on that. I also want to mention that I'm pretty sure we know what Seth becomes, because the Solu that's a river on Naboo. The Solu River.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
well, spoilers. I mean, like, it's not spoilers because we're talking about the entire chapter. This is like chapter 36, I believe. Like, they get wiped out. The Solu, they're gone.
Yeah.
Destroyed. But no, you didn't. Sorry, man, you didn't sound aggressive at all. It's all like Joe says himself in one of the footnotes. Like, there like four or five different ways to like take this, like as an Easter egg, as like, and for the most part, I think a lot of references kind of fly over even our heads, right? Like, we do the best that we can, but it's. I could be reading something and not even know that it's an Easter egg or a reference to something. So I think like everybody's kind of free to interpret it the way that they want to, right? That's the beauty of the work. And I think, you, Lance, for instance, interpreting it as all these other things separate from Star Wars, I promise you will not detract from your overall enjoyment of this work. Right? There may be other reasons that detract from your overall enjoyment of the work, like the dense language, the lists of names. There's other things, but like I don't think that references to other things are going to do it.
No, and I think that maybe it's kind of gray. Like even for me, who was like a maximalist when it comes to continuity, like I consider George R. Binks to be a certified EU canonical story and event. It had to have been. I'm a maximalist when it comes to continuity, but like with some of these, maybe it doesn't. Like Marcel, maybe it doesn't unfold the same way in the Star Wars galaxy. But then there's some like the Ahsogians with ET, where I just feel so convicted that ET exists in the Star Wars universe because it just all the connections make so much sense at this point.
Yeah.
But then on others, I'm like, well, it doesn't make as much sense. So maybe it's more coincidence there. Like maybe not all examples have the same answer, even for people who would include some or who wouldn't include some.
I completely agree. Again, Hellboy, that's not like that's just like, oh, Dark Horse, Hellboy, that's funny. But with like you said, with E.T., that's really cute. That's a really cute reference to like tie together Steven Spielberg and George Lucas that they already did. So yeah.
Yeah. What? Sorry, I don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, and it chronologically speaking, at least the present day takes place around that time, anyways, right? So you're not missing much, and I don't even get half the references in here, but I'm still enjoying it.
There's another cute little aside here on page 90 about the naming of Alderaan. His father had first called their world Aldebaran for its resemblance to the Star of Legend, but after his Killick allies referred to him as the Alteron Alderman of Aldebaran, his granddaughter, a very young Lorna, called it Alderaan.
That's right. That's where the name
Alderaan, if you're
do we have aldermen in the US or Canada? Because I know we have there are aldermen in the UK.
I think they exist and
over here.
Yeah, we don't have like aldermen. I think existed in the U.S. back in the day, like pre-Depression era, but I don't know if they still exist.
An alderman in the UK is like if you have a local city that has a local like city council. There's city council representatives who are elected officially. And then an alderman is elected unofficially by the people to represent a smaller group of people, a minority of people that reside in the city, and better represent their interests in an unofficial capacity. At least that's what it was in Scotland.
Yeah, I think analogous roles do exist within municipal government in North America, but I wouldn't be able to speak to that with any confidence. This is interesting here. Read SE first and then read Fate of the Jedi. There are some things that SE references that I haven't read the original sort of source material that it's referencing. And I thought to myself, like, maybe I should really hold off and read these things. And I tried to adhere to the reading list as much as possible. But honestly, like, so I started reading Starcrow, The Wise, after reading the parts where he's mentioned in Supernatural Encounters. And honestly, it's really enhancing. Yeah, it's enhancing my experience of reading that text, right? So it's almost like, whichever way you do it, I don't know that it's really going to take away from the experience, right?
I feel like what you'll get if you read like Fate of the Jedi first is you'll just know who the characters are. You'll know it's the father, son, daughter, and Abeloth. But like the rest of it is really kind of just, as Marcel said, it'll if anything it'll enhance it. When you actually read like Fate of the Jedi.
Yeah, and
good point.
So Princess Lorna eventually does get married to Lord Nile and goes and lives with him on what was the planet's name?
Seth.
Was it called Seth, the planet itself? Wild.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes
because they're the
Seth. She moved to the Hyades estate of Somerton country on Seth.
Okay. And she starts kind of like, I guess she gets that warning from the Solu because she visits the Solu on Seth because that's where they live. So I'm just throwing up something. So she starts delving into her husband's past. And, apart from the usual administrative documents, what she discovered from the genealogy books, et cetera, was perplexing. An odd admixture of religious beliefs and ancient history. She's like, oh man, this is like when you find out like your husband's part of like an ancient cult. The second line was old. Baron Jamie. Go for it.
Oh no, this is the part in I think it's Stepfather where he refers to his wife by the wrong name, and she's like, "Oh no!" And he's already like killed 5 people. Yeah, it's like, "Oh no, that's bad."
So we're gonna get to page 294 in a second. We're still on page 293 here, but just to finish this off, so there's it says likely this was just men's club affairs exaggerated for theatrical purposes. I almost feel like these are some maybe like indirect references to like Freemasons and stuff like that over here.
Yeah.
33rd from Howard McNeil. But in any event, so like she kind of plays it off like, oh, it's just like some boys club. My husband's not part of some ancient evil cult. The Vault of the Sea, as it's called. I think that's the cult name, right? The Vault of the Sea.
Yep.
Yeah. So then we get to page 294. I think Max, you wanted to.
So she also mentions at the very end of 293, Niall says like, oh, our 8-week-old baby is perfectly healthy, and she's just kind of like really taken aback by that, and he's like, wait, what? I'm pregnant? Like, and then she goes into his library again and finds this tome that goes into these weird kind of like spellcraft things, and she comes across this ritual called Tripcath, and it's also known as the Bornless ritual. And it's like, so there were several methods of effecting the spell. The one that held the most danger involved direct manipulation of the midichlorians in order to bring forth a suitable empty vessel to house a god. To effect this required damaging and distorting the midichlorians so that they blindly obeyed the magus instead of the wills. So obviously, if you know Darth Plagueis, he could use the Force to influence the midichlorians to create life.
Yeah.
So Lord Niall is easily like, maybe not the progenitor, but he is our first like known practicer of midichlorian manipulation, which is fascinating. I know I put it on my story when I was reading it on Instagram, and someone forgot is one of the editors. It might have been Harry, who reached out to me and said, "You're correct. You did just read like the predecessor of midichlorian manipulation." It might not have been him. I'm not sure because it was a while back. But obviously, being a big Darth Plagueis fan, that absolutely blew me away. And we learn later on like why that knowledge isn't known to Plagueis, and why he has to relearn these secrets, and that it was a lost art. And so essentially, Lord Niall used midichlorian manipulation to create what will later become known as Starcrow.
Yeah.
Starcrow is an incredibly powerful sorcerer, and so it mentions like to bring forth a suitably empty vessel to house a god, and Anakin was created through the direct manipulation of midichlorians from Plagueis's doings, as we know, or presumably that is the case because as we know, things kind of matched up that way. So and Anakin obviously being a chosen one. But you know, it's just so cool. It's so cool, and I love it.
Yeah.
So is this the prophecy right here? Let me just like kind of share this like Starcrow prophecy over here.
In the like dark
evil looking text.
I love that font. Detail
in the dark text, and it says like he will be birthed in blood.
And
at the end,
that's these horror elements that Joe's pulling from. There's a lot of stuff here that is just so dark and twisted that is just perfect.
See, the Nile dynasty remains devoted to the twin serpents who are the fanged gods, Yamka, who is darkness and Lord of the Abyss, and is known as like Thamo Gorgos, and his consort Lothan, who is the Lady of Chaos. These are the immortal gods of the Sith, I believe, right? Like this is direct references to the immortal gods of the Sith.
And they govern over what is essentially hell in the Star Wars galaxy, which has long been called Chaos or Abyss.
Right. And so like they're like that's the prophecy of Starcrow. And so Lorna's just like, oh yeah, whatever, my husband's part of some boy club. That's fine.
It's all very occult.
And then like what she like faints or whatever and like wakes up to like 8 weeks later with
memory gaps, just like memory loss gaps. Oh man, so scary.
That could also be like you know how Kip Duran erased Kwizux's memory, took those memories right out.
That's
so perhaps Lord Nile was doing that to her.
Yeah. This Starcrow part, like this is I don't think that this isn't actually Starcrow the Wise, because I think I've only read the first book of Starcrow, the God Form Assumption of Starcrow the Wise, but none of this, like the birth of Starcrow is in it, and it's in Supernatural Encounters, and it's quite dark.
Yeah.
It's
all like, you know, I remember I was telling Ken about this when I was reading it, that it's all very it's almost like Game of Thrones-esque in a way.
Yes, very.
Because I know like Melisandre creates like a being through witchcraft, and it's like the shadow being that kills Renly Baratheon. Spoilers if you don't know, sorry. So it's all very Game of Thrones, but it's also very occult and very dark, and I love that so much. It's such a joy to read. As twisted as that sounds, it's a very cool story to read.
On a much lighter note, I had my idiot moment of the day when I was reading this. Because when I read Bornless Ritual, I didn't read it as Bornless. I read it as Boneless, and I immediately went, boneless. And I got real hungry. So that was my idiot moment of the week, right there.
But like, look how dark this is. This is, I believe, on page 298. It's essentially like I have this title as The Birth of Starcrow. In an odd way, she felt glad that her ordeal was coming to an end. Like she's taken to this dark grove by these figures. It's very, very, very cult-like, right? And
would you say it's a cult encounter?
It is this is a cult encounter. Like play the X-Files theme. But so Lady Lorna died in labor again, born in blood. Starcrow. She'd earlier named the boy Jamie, but his father rejected that, calling him Starcrow. Oof. Lord Nile held the baby up and invoked the ritual of the twin serpents. Alderaan was obviously like, you know, this Princess of Alderaan died and gave birth to this dark entity. But it's like later that night, bowing before his empty double-headed phoenix throne, the Magister of the Order of Abzu, and I believe Abzu, is that another name for Nakash, like the Father of Shadows? Anyways, I don't know if that's the case, but Magister of the Order of Abzu pleaded with the dark gods that he served that the whole ordeal had not been in vain. Like, damn.
It's really, truly horror, and that's a trope that we see in horror, right? Birthing the demon, like darkness manifested as this twisted child. I think that's a repetitive trope that we've seen throughout the history of horror as a genre. Yeah. And it's done masterfully here.
I will say that the God Form Assumption of Starcrow the Wise, I think that it's very ambitious in its scope and, like, you know, trying to be an in-universe. Like the prologue is basically like a Padawan steals this book called the God Form Assumption of Starcrow the Wise, which is like a Sith text from an old Jedi Master, and she starts to read it, and then the text itself is, it's like on one page it's in like its original Sith writing, and then on the other page it's translated into Basic or English,
which is such a cool touch.
Which is very cool, and it's for us to read, and it's done in, again, like epic poetry. It's done in a certain meter, and it's I think it's very interesting that Michael Brennan did that. So huge shout out to him. And I look forward to finishing the rest of it. Starcrow, and then we're told on page 298 after he's born that when he grows up, he decimates the remaining native Solu population. So again, those are
R.I.P.
Were they reptiles or something like that? But
they were reptiles. Yeah.
They that was the one who, like, one of them gave the Princess Lorna the warning. So he genocides them, and then because they were attacking the House of Seth, and he becomes, essentially, after killing his father, he becomes the ruler of the Sethan people.
I should also expand upon that. So this happens. He kills his father when he's 6 years old.
Yes.
He crawls up on his lap. He says this really crazy line. He just says, "The seed of the chosen was placed into your mother, from which it went to you, and has now come to me. But I must have all of it if I am to emerge." And with that, the boy took out a blade and stabbed his father in the belly. So it's just that's very crazy. It's just this kid running up to him, jumping on his lap, and just
That can be a scene in The Omen.
It reminds me of Damien from The Omen. Exactly. Yeah.
And after stabbing the father, he drains his father's life essence, leaving his body an empty, lifeless husk. Like, so good. Well, it's not good for Niall, but so entertaining.
Sit back, and but then we get a bunch of Starcrow lore, and this is where we start to get an adaptation of the god form assumption of Starcrow the Wise. Mm-hmm. So he wants more power. He wants to assume a god form, and he eventually he goes to visit basically the Daizan Queen Blavatstar, which is on it's not really made clear in Supernatural Encounters, but it's made clear in the god form on Dathomir.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. She's
a witch.
Yeah. These are like the daughters of the witch queens of Droman Kos, which we talked about last stream.
Yeah.
These Stygian witches, as they're called. And so he wants to form a marriage alliance with Blavatstar, who I believe she was the one known as the Red Witch who had also written the Book of Daizan, which is another Sith text, right? Another Sith grimoire, right? Like the god form assumption of Starcrow the Wise eventually becomes. Starcrow wanted power. And so we find out in the god form assumption that he was visited by the sun.
Yeah.
And told to go to Droman Kos not Droman Kos, to Dathomir in order to find power. Blavatstar has a daughter. I think I don't know how her name's pronounced. Is it Rosalie?
Rosalie.
I just said
Rosalie.
So yeah, okay. Rosalie or Rosalie, but she basically seduces Starcrow, or at least he allows himself, or he seduces her. It's not quite clear to me because there's so much to take in.
Mutual seduction.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the book, in the actual god form, it's like they were both. I believe they were both visited by the sun and just said oh, you guys got to get together and just kind of go crazy and kill things, right?
Yep.
Bet, let's do it. So that's basically how it happened. It was a mutual kind of seduction, as Brennan said.
Yeah. So what is Starcrow's god form assumption? I mean, we can get into that. He basically wants to inhabit the body of a dragon.
Star dragon, particularly.
Yeah. Absolutely
wild.
Crazy. Duinagwin. What's crazy about this is that there's almost kind of a biblical allegory there. It's right, the dragon is an allegory for Satan, and Starcrow is almost like the Antichrist, right? He's Satan incarnate kind of thing. And so he wants to inhabit the body of a dragon, Duinagwin. So what do? It says years and wars passed, and an iniquitous line was raised, but ever Starcrow kept his eyes on the star dragons. The time came when they were at war. Starcrow and Rosalie had already divined the location of Zuquares, the dragon's heart, which would thereafter be known as the dragon's graveyard. Mm-hmm. For there they killed the custodian of the Duinagwin, along with all of the precious star dragon eggs, save for one that Starcrow took for himself. As the human frame did not well suit Lothan, there's a reference to, of course, the immortal god, the Sith Lothan, he readied to transfer his essence, that's Starcrow ready to transfer his essence, into this more potent form. The Bornless Ritual, as Maxine talked about earlier, came with the cost not just to the Star Dragons, but to all of the Sethan wizards who worked the spell.
However, another thing, so there's like 2 bornless rituals that are mentioned on here. One of them is obviously the midichlorian manipulations, but there's this other one called Itsu Ashmud, and it is essence transfer, essentially.
Yes. Dark Empire, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he essence transfers into the Star Dragon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely
Why didn't Palpatine do
bonkers
that?
stuff, isn't it?
Mind blowing.
So we're told that Queen Blavatstar, who was present during the ritual, was also killed. But this was an act of matricide carried out by her daughter Rosalie or Rosalie, Starcrow's mistress, who sought to be queen in her stead and would brook no impediment to her ambitions. Again, Game of Thrones-esque, right? Like it's very like backstabby at this point in the narrative. So Starcrow, the ritual is a success, and he becomes he inhabits he leaves his human form and inhabits the body of a star dragon, a Duiniguin, and assumes his god form. So the god form assumption.
They make big note of this in the book that it's like a white dragon. They call him like the white dragon.
Right. And then we get into the Dragon Wars,
which is the phenomenal art piece. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh man, yeah.
That's the thumbnail for this specific stream. Yeah.
And it's the cover. It's the cover for the Legends Con hardcover.
The Star Dragon, so the Duiniguin, they fight against their offspring races, specifically the Basiliskans, and other dragon races that were malevolent forces that were helping the ancient powers. And it said there's this line here. Ken, it's on page 299. If you can read it for us, it starts with "like a mighty clap of the gods."
Alrighty. Like a mighty clap of the gods, the thunder of the star dragon swept the skies with majestic outspread wings as jaws of steel clashed against raging bites and raking claws. On that day, the clouds were filled with the blood and the fire of battling brethren, and so numerous were the bodies that fell from the heights that it was said the Father of Lights himself wept.
Crazy. It's crazy. That's Tolkien-esque biblical.
Yeah.
Well, it was said that the Father of Lights himself wept because there's just dragons dying left, right, and center. Also, very metal too. Like dragons.
That's the best line from Hellraiser. Jesus wept, and then he exploded.
Well, that's the thing, right? Matt Wilkins talked about supernatural encounters being the Silmarillion of Star Wars. Absolutely. But it's lines like this with like the Father of Lights himself wept, where although I am a Christian and a believer, I want to say that this is the Bible of Star Wars, practically. You know what I mean? Supernatural encounters is just like the Bible of Star Wars. It's even like a step further than the Silmarillion. You know what I mean?
A step further than the Silmarillion is such a crazy statement to say, because the Silmarillion itself is crazy.
I know, right?
On its own.
I feel like as I've been reading this, I've just felt like nothing else compares. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just so hard to describe because it emulates everything and mirrors everything, but like elevates everything.
Yeah. Can we bring up the art piece?
Yes, we. Oh, you want us to art pieces? Do I have a? Sure, I think I do actually because here. Let me see if I can pull that up.
Also, we got a sweet reference on 301 that I'm sure Max you appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I think I know what you're talking about, and absolutely look at that.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So imagine the blue ones in the kind of upper left corner area. That would be the Star Dragon.
Yeah.
And then the rest would be the Basiliskans.
Well, you can tell by their ones. Look at there's different races of dragons here, but you can see look at the horny scales on the right hand side, Max. Like you could tell these they look evil, right?
Also there's a big prominent one on the Basiliskan side with the kind of curved horn there. It looks like a mythosaur.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it might be.
Could be the predecessor to a mythosaur, because we know that the mythosaurs did originate from star dragons and the other
Yeah.
dragon races.
True.
This is personally my favorite art piece from Guillaume Ducos. I
Really?
think it's
Okay,
phenomenal.
Me too. And it's also the
definitely up
cover
there.
of the hardcover Legends Con variant of Supernatural Account. Yes, there you go. Yes.
Awesome.
That cover is very metal. Anything with like dragons fighting each other is metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's automatically badass.
There's reference on page 300, and we're coming to almost to the end of chapter 36. But there's reference to on page 300 to Starcrow, I think, putting some to baleful use in the outer darkness, where they were bred with each other in Lothan's own seminal material, bringing about the monstrous Sugati, the serpentine Worthrent, and the titanic Balyegs, which were aquatic and Tellurian monsters called behemoths from the world below. So there's like some weird genetic experiments going on. And I think we also get here, it says, included in this rank were the two-headed Eborcisks, battle hydras, and Gruthic wind beasts, but the Leviathans were the pinnacle of their aims. So named for the Lord of Chaos. Some had 5, 6, or even 7 heads. And I almost feel like that's, again, like a reference to, like a biblical reference to Revelation, where you have like the 7-headed beast. But I don't know. So I don't know if that's the case. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. But then it's we have we're told on page 300 that the Leviathan is set to guard the royal seed. Assume that's the royal seed of Starcrow. And then we have here, there's a mix between the Sarmax and the Aris King on page 300 and 301. In this way did the avatar of the darkness manifest in Sky River, he that is known as Yamka, god of the Yamri. And that entity later worshipped as Yun Yamka by the Yuzan Vong.
By the Yuzan Vong, yes.
He basically he gestated for centuries to grow until it manifested as a gigantic cyclopean bulbous head under which thousands of tentacles tracked. That is terrifying. That's
absolutely.
That all right, this is a really weird kind of analogy here. So has anyone ever seen like the Pastafarian artwork?
Yes.
Yes. Monster?
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
That Yunyamka is the spaghetti monster.
Wow.
We have
Yuzan Vong unironically worship the flying spaghetti.
spaghetti
That is the funniest thing on earth.
So they're Pastafarians.
We have FSM in the Supernatural Encounters. Pastafarians are in Star Wars confirmed.
Let's go. And then, obviously, so goes the Yuzan Vong tale of their creation and the galaxy's creation, that Yun Yamka ripped off pieces of himself throughout the galaxy, and those became known as the different galaxies and whatnot.
I think it's so cool too that I
was all done.
I think it's really cool too that Joe Bongiorno takes similar sounding names and draws connection. So Yamka, the god of the Yamri, of course it's the same
Yamka,
thing being drawn from that is what the Yuzan Vong worship. I love that like it's all connected.
Some of these connections basically there's some of these connections that he made like they just beg to be made, right? Because they, sound they sound similar. So eventually, like to jump ahead a bit, Starcrow eventually gets defeated by Solomon, who is quite literally a Cathar or like a cat.
Cathar Jesus, basically.
Yeah, cat space Jesus. He's like Solomon's son, right? I mean, like that's very on the nose.
Yeah.
You can read more about that in the God Form Assumption, but he's
even doing the pose.
Yeah, I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like perfect, like spot on. He's got
Cathar,
the hair and everything.
Yeah, he's
wow.
Cathar's Messiah, essentially.
Yeah.
But what's it called? Glorious Words or something like what? There's like a religious, basically it's like the Gospels, but for Cathars, and it's like a religious text.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, read the God Form Assumption. You can read a bit about it in Supernatural Encounters. But before Starcrow dies, he has offspring, and we're told that Rosalie does not survive the birth of her brood, who were powerful draconian Nephilim, a vermilion bipedal dragon-like race. Starcrow clones Rosalie a bunch of times in order to continue to birth his offspring, which is very demented. But again, we also have a reference to Melkor. It's footnote 61, which is of course a Lord of the Rings reference to Morgoth, Melkor. But it says, is Melkor is ancient even by Sefi standards. Sephi being sort of the elf-like race, and is derived from the high Sephi Malku, which means king. From what scant accounts have been pieced together, Melkor is the namesake of a once imprisoned ancient one. So there you have your Lord of the Rings reference. There is additionally a connection to Bogan by means of another title given him in the word Bolgen, which translates as filled with rage. So that's on footnote 61.
Beautiful connections.
Yeah. I believe one of Starcrow's sons was Ormuz. Am I correct? Oh, sorry. It would be the descendants of Blavatstar's first son, Ormuz, that the members of the Shadow Council would eventually emerge. And so we learn more about this Shadow Council, and they're really the ones who kind of create. They're the perpetuators of the left-hand path, which eventually culminates in the Order of the Sith. I think this part got a little kind of escaped from me a bit, but I think that's sort of the genesis. Bren Crow, Max Crow, Ken Crow, Al Crow, am I right in that? I don't know.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the left-hand path is just a completely different thing.
Okay, the left-hand path perpetuates the dark, like the dark.
Yeah,
I
would imagine they do connect to it, because I know Typhagem is known as the left-handed god. So it's like it's like maybe a specifically Typhagem related cult,
Yeah. So Ormuz has a bunch of followers. They're called the Followers of Hor, or the Ashurans. And we find out that the Ashurans later war with the Masasi, so they kind of return to Dromantoth, right? But Ormuz is the one, Blavatstar's first son, who creates the Shadow Council, and we learn who they are. Now, it says there's 6 members of the Shadow Council, but there's 7 names, and I just haven't been able to square that away. And maybe it's because one of them ends up getting killed by his son.
Yeah.
But there's Nemonides, Dekrith, called Daretha Nemo Dak on Merlissi. And so we have this reference to Daretha here, which eventually, later becomes Darth, right? So it's very interesting to see that. We have Eloi Jadeo, the Maelstrom of Alpharides, called Sanct Vitus. These all sound like Dark Souls bosses, by the way.
Yeah, they do.
Din Grut, known as Zargrut, the Tyrant of Milinar. Dakara Remises, the Black Pharaoh of Doan, who is responsible for perpetuating Rafa pyramids, ziggurats, and
very clearly a Ramses reference,
right? Across Sith worlds. So that's maybe where the Egyptian influence comes from. Lord Zalat.
Our history has been influenced by the Sith all along. I knew it.
That's fine. It's like that Star Trek episode, Who Mourns for Adonis, or whatever, where it's like, the Greek gods are actually aliens, and they're the ones who.
Yes.
It goes back to that conversation we had, Brennan, where we were talking about did the Romulans influence ancient Rome?
Yes, with Alex and Matu. Yeah.
Lord Zelashiel of Malachor, called Zelashiel the Blasphemer, or Apollyon, which is just again metal as hell. We have Nair Hephdre. I feel like this is a reference to Nyarlathotep, which is a Lovecraftian entity. The Crimson King of Craius II, and Oricon, and Keeper of the Secrets. And then we have Sokratu the Elder, regarded as a great scientist and the philosopher king of Rimk. I want to get to know all these guys. I want to Facebook friend all these guys.
Lord, it also said that Lord Zelashiel. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Summoned, yeah. Are you going to talk about who he summoned? Yeah, go for it.
Oh, I was going to talk about how I found it really interesting that he inverted the Celestials' language. That's such an interesting concept to me. Turned it to black speech, and it became the old tongue of the Sith. I find that so cool.
Is that what's screaming at you in KOTOR too? Atris's big library of Sith holocrons, and she talks to one. Oh, Sith holocron, what should I do? And it's just screeching at her.
That might be the case.
That's funny. I like that.
Wasn't it said that Darth Nihilus spoke the language of the Force itself? What if he's
that's what it was supposed to be, but I think it's just gibberish, because that was the original idea. Was he was speaking the Force, but I think it's just gibberish in the end.
Was that stuff they planned to expand?
Yeah, that was planned, but I think what he's saying is it's literally just gibberish.
The other thing that's cool is that Sokratu taught the Sith of longevity, death, and the spirit world. So this Shadow Council essentially influences the development of the Sith, right? And they all have their different agents, but they don't war with one another because I think they're sort of kept in check by Ormuz, right? Or maybe it's not Ormuz, but I remember reading somewhere, again, there's so much. I remember reading somewhere that they're kind of kept in check and that they don't like get into internecine battles with one another. I think that they're called the Ninus Gazeta. I can't pronounce that word, but that is the word that here. I'm just gonna throw it into the chat and then I'm gonna like put it up.
Ninus Gazeta. I don't know.
Almost sounds German.
Oh. Yeah,
it sounds like to me that sounds like Babylonian, almost like Sumerian, right? Like Nineveh or something like that.
Assyrian, even
Assyrian, exactly. One of those ancient languages, but that's what it kind of looks like to me. So I believe though Gorog tries to recruit the Shadow Council, right? I think on page 304 it says she was Mora Goram was sent by Gorog, but then she has a vision she has a vision and she flees after trying to recruit them. It says, snapping out of the psychic omen, Mora Goram immediately withdrew back to the gate, leaving behind the Ninus Gazeta. To the Sither, she declared, "They are coming, they who have broken free of the unlighted chambers, but one day it is our kind who shall prevail, and you who will scurry into your holes." When she says they are coming, is that like that's some kind of like foreshadowing for the immortal gods of the Sith?
Probably.
I think so.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
So after Gorog and her agent Mora Goram retreat through the portal, the Sither had the Ninus Gazeta prepare the infernal gate with sacrifices of slaves and invocations. Again, very cool. And they're sort of sent out into the galaxy. They're called the First Shadow Council, the Archmages of Droman Kos. They what is it? A great honor is placed upon you. Go forth as our agents, seize positions of authority amongst the humans and others, maintain the face of respectability, and accomplish what the serpent people could not. A philosophy of the dark that will never be challenged. And so that's why I say that they kind of create the Order of the Sith, because that's what they've been charged to do. There's a lot here. There was a reference I saw on, I believe it was page 305. It says, codified in the starry wisdom of the ancient ones, they each went forth to motivate the dedicated followers of the left-hand path. The vault of the Sion Seth and Pax, from which came the Kashimur and the Gentarajas of Gentui. And then the Black Lodge on Terra 1. I almost wonder if the Black Lodge was a Twin Peaks reference. I don't know. Maybe one day Joe can tell me if that's the case. But there's a thing called the Black Lodge on Twin Peaks, and it's I don't know. It just kind of stuck out to me, so I throw that out there. It says, out of which the croak had emerged, and of course we know Roker Gepta is a croak, right?
Yep, I saw that.
And other cults that they kind of get involved in.
I always love when warlocks are brought up, because warlocks just always seem so cool to me. I've always loved the word warlock, so it just sounds good. And so I enjoy seeing it brought up here. And also vampiric race, the Rakshi here. There's several vampire species that we see throughout supernatural encounters, and vampiric, I don't know how to say it, is mentioned several times in descriptive words for various species and abominations throughout SE.
Yeah. And then we have here on page 305, sorry, just to finish off the thought, of all of them, it was the Order of the Sith that thrived. So they all sort of perpetuate these dark side cults, but it says of all of them, it was the Order of the Sith that thrived, moving from a mere race to an ideology, and at last to the status of the chosen race. Sorry, go for it.
I have some little connections here. So going back to the one of the Shadow Council members, Dakar Ramesses, as Black Pharaoh of Doan. Doan was in the Dynasty of Evil book in the Bane trilogy. Was the big? It was a planet in which a lot of the plot happens. The Princess of Doan Caleb's daughter, Caleb the healer from Ambria, becomes like the princess or queen of Doan. So that's just a little cool connection where, you know, Bane and Xana have their first fight there, and then they go to Ambria. And then another one, I'm gonna make Matt Wilkins cringe a little by bringing up Knight Errant here. So they mention Darknell.
I was just about to talk about that too. Yeah.
And Darknell becomes the capital world of Lord Damon in Knight Errant. Yes. So it's a cool connection. Everybody knows I like Knight Errant.
Darknell is also the planet with which Cassian Andor in the EU goes on a mission in a story by Michael Stackpole.
What was it
called? Interlude at Darknell. His code name was Acho or Acho, something like that. And that code name was given to an unnamed human male who went on a mission for the rebels to save Jan Dodonna in Interlude at Darknell. And
How do you spell that, Brennan? His code name?
ACHO is what I believe it is, from what I recall. If you go to the Interlude at Darknell Wikipedia page, you'll see in quotation marks the name. It begins with an A. And then that code name was revealed to be Cassian Andor's code name in the new canon timeline. So by process of like using the reverse, that means that the unnamed guy must have been Cassian Andor in the EU all along since the 1990s.
Wow.
Using some mental gymnastics there.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I love stealing.
On
I'll find it. I have it in my notes somewhere.
Please do, because I remember I pronounced that a bit differently than you did.
Okay.
And here, Interlude at Darknell. Let's see if it mentions it here. Yeah, if you don't mind looking that up for us real quickly.
Yeah, I'll grab that.
While that happens, I just want to quickly do a little plug here regarding Knight Errant. I'm writing an article for Matt Wilkins' Expanded Universe website. I'm in the defense of Knight Errant. So that should be up.
Look out for that.
I look forward to reading it.
Yeah, I like Knight Errant. I know Brennan did not. We were talking about Darknell. So the reference was, while Brennan's looking that up, the Verkolak of Vorlok, who are the demons who went to the world of Nell, known later as Darknell, whose inhabitants are called the Nell of Muspili. And I feel like Muspili is like almost a reference to like Muspelheim in the Norse mythology, which is one of the realms. So we're on the last two pages before we finish off, page 306 and 307, and we talk. It's okay. I almost feel like that's AACA. I think that it's like pronounced like H.
H. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That's how I pronounce it. Like
Isn't that the first the German city Aachen? Isn't it also the first time spelled that way?
Aachen.
So it might be Ach.
It's Aachen.
I mean, if it's a German word, you know, I get it could also just be just a sound that Michael Stackpole made.
Yeah.
Michael Stackpole was just at his keyboard, making noises.
Next Legends Con, I'm gonna be like Mike Stackpole. Do you recall? And he's gonna be like, actually, he remembered a lot. So I feel like he could answer that question, but I would expect it to be like, what? Who are you talking about? So
these nerds and their deep references.
Yeah,
man.
exactly. You know what? I will say the authors at Legends Con, like they didn't blink, they didn't bat an eyelash. Like they knew exactly what we were talking about. Like
they were nerds.
Yeah,
those people were nerds.
The EU lives in their head rent free. Well, there you go.
Is he though?
Is he? Yeah, supernatural encounters established. I'm just joking.
Well, I mean, you know.
Okay, wait.
But speaking of Alderaan, we in page 306 we go back to another. Was it Queen of Alderaan, Delia? And she realizes that the Sethans are evil dudes, and I think actually fights against Starcrow, if I'm not mistaken. Under a monster, or maybe she just learns. So Delia's face dropped, but he went on to clarify the rumors she'd heard. Warmongers to the last, those Sethans, under a monster called Starcrow. They laid waste to an entire civilization. So maybe she doesn't. She's just learning about it. The emblem on this coin is ancient. It is the mark of the Vault of the Abyss, a devilish cult of whom the less said, the better. That your sister, because I think her sister was Lorna, right? If I'm not mistaken, that your sister secreted this to you was likely an indication that she had discovered their dark secret. So she finds out that Lorna basically got taken in by a dark cult, and she finds out about Starcrow.
Yeah. It was satisfying that she found out about that in the end, because during the specific section earlier that dealt with the whole Nile thing, the sister was who she was trying to secretly get the message out to. And so, like, I didn't know if they were going to come back to that when I was first reading it. So I was kind of pained. I was like, her sister's not going to know what happened to them. And I have a response for Scott in a second. But
That's all right.
But
okay,
yeah,
go do your responses. I want to hear. This has become a Cassian Andor stream now.
So Ak is said to be a code name of Cassian Andor in the Rogue One visual dictionary, one of many used, one of many identities assumed, which comes straight from the expanded universe story. It's also mentioned in the new canon that Cassian Andor had a history with Jan Dodonna, I believe, from that Rogue One visual dictionary, which the resident canon detractor, once owned that visual dictionary. And I quite enjoyed it, I have to be honest. But the Ak from that story is listed as being one of a numerous number of aliases assumed by Cassian Andor. So, could he have fabricated his birth records? Yes, basically. He's assuming identities. That's not just a name. That's a background that comes with that.
I think there is also precedent for him. Okay, again, I didn't watch Andor, but I saw like some Twitter thread with Pop. I guess apparently like he has a planet listed that he's from on.
Yes, that's what I was going for. So sorry.
Go for it. No, you do. You probably know more about it than I do.
So in the dictionary that Brennan is referencing, it mentions that Cassian's homeworld is Fest, and then in the show in Andor they mentioned that Fest was just a fabrication. It was fake. It wasn't. That's not actually where he's from. I forgot the name of the place where he's actually from. I can't remember it right now.
Or supposedly actually from.
Yeah, well, I think they actually show that he's from that.
Yeah, we do see him, get picked up, and he was there. He had a sister and everything. But the Alderaan being from Alderaan could very well be a fabrication, just as he has multiple aliases with multiple backgrounds. If anyone knows, like reading Black Widow comics, I'm a huge Black Widow fan. So she has multiple aliases that she assumes throughout the comics, and they all have different, birth certificates and ID cards that mention she's from this place or from that place. So it's absolutely a possibility.
Doesn't Han Solo do that too? I remember in the Han Solo books by A.C. Crispin, he does that like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah,
where he pulls out an alias, and it never works because it's Han Solo, but still he tries.
And even in Fate of the Jedi, the Millennium Falcon itself has aliases. I remember he tells Alana, like, "Hey, pick from this list of different transponder names that we can use to get away." So,
or as Ezra Bridger likes to be known as Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah.
So to cap off the chapter 36 and part 1 of book 4 in this discussion, the Sethan Empire is in a weakened state because, as I said earlier, Starkrow was defeated at the hands of Solomon and Cathar. But I believe they go to war with, I want to say, it says, the Etresians with an army of star dragons at their back. So I think the Sethan Empire is basically destroyed. Their routes on the Vault of the Sea, reduced to the Kashmir Pact. So they're reduced to basically like a small time cult at that point.
Yeah,
and that's why they don't take. It's almost like I almost feel like there's like this game of like background game going on with the Immortal Gods where they're preparing like their way into the galaxy, but let's let all these different dark side cults kind of fight it out first and see who emerges victorious, and that's going to be the cult that represents us and our interests.
If you want to seize power, chaos is going to help you to do that.
Yeah, you're going to weed out the weak and see who kind of makes it through and survives, right?
They're going to disable
ideology.
That's kind of like in Dark Empire, where Palpatine just sits back and lets all the warlords fight it out until he comes in.
Let them destabilize the galaxy, then sweep in.
Exactly.
We also Alderaanians get involved in this, and that there's an exile from their planet, like they leave Alderaan so that they don't subject the Killiks to violence and war and getting destroyed. but it said at the end of page 307, it's like but ever the royal house remembered where they came from, and it was prophesied that one day they would return. So eventually they're going to return to Alderaan, the humans. Yeah. Sorry, Al, I think I cut you off.
Oh no, I was just about to say. In Darth Bane has the same idea. Poison diluted across 20 cups is not going to be as effective as all the poison in one cup. That's like the core ideology of the Sith, is the stronger. Rather than have all these dark side cults, one to be the strongest would be ideal. So that just lines up with previous lore.
Yes. Yeah, Brendan, I don't know if you saw the comment, but it seems like we have some dissenting opinions here. Maybe you guys can have a stream
Apparently
on.
So. Well, I have a list of like 48 YouTube videos I'm working on, and on number 3 is the Cassian Andor Ock. Like,
well, now you gotta have Scott on that.
Now I've got to have Max and Scott on. We can have an open forum debate. I'm not versed on the canon side, so I'll need Max's help with that a little more. We can have an interesting discussion.
Well, Scott, does he just say? Is it like an internal monologue where he just says "I am from Alderaan," or is it like he shows a paper that says "I am from Alderaan"? Because I think that's what we're getting hung up on here.
And even if it's an internal monologue, because I read Interlude at Darknell in like 2019 or 2020, so it's been a while. But if it's an inner monologue, it could still be like convincing himself, right? Setting himself in the mindset.
So to get back to supernatural encounters and not this Cassian Andor debate.
Cassian Andor speaks.
We're told in the Cassian Andor in that I love spelling Skarsgård. In that thing that I just threw up there in that excerpt, we're told that the Duinagon Queen, who basically like raises the Hyades estate, which is the estate of Starkrow and Lord Nile, and the surrounding city, eradicating much of the history of Starkrow. So now it's like some kind of like ancient lore. Little remains of their spiritual taint, save for the Dark Grove and the Sethan lore and legend of the Seven Doors. I don't know if that's a reference to something, but essentially like that's all kind of that remains. And of course, then we have like the god form assumption of Starkrow the Wise. So when does this take place, the Starkrow story? This takes place like long before the Dread Pirate Zim. It takes place like long before really anything that we see in the main Star Wars timeline. Like this is during the Empyrean War, the first of the 3 cosmic wars. No, not at all. It was very fun actually. We're wrapping up here, so I didn't want to get into it too much. Save it for Brendan's video.
Mention how the Sethan estate and all the knowledge was ruined, and that is where the knowledge of midichlorian manipulation was lost. So, and that's why Plagueis has to relearn the art.
Yes, so to bend the midichlorians to his will. To create a life. So I mean, like that's the first part of book 4. I feel like we've thoroughly discussed as much of it as we could. There's probably some stuff that we're missing. Any final thoughts before we cap off?
Who wants to go first?
I have none. I'm totally like I'm spent. I'm empty right now. I'm an empty vessel. I've just
You've been drained like Starkrow drained his father.
That's exactly right. I can only hope that my son exsanguinates me before he assumes the mortal form of the dragon. Like, he's only 1 year old right now, but there's still time. So I got 5 years. Yeah.
You got 5 years.
It's every father's dream.
He's exsanguinated by their son.
Yeah.
So I'll give some final thoughts. I thought this first part was amazing. The Starkrow stuff obviously being like such a big highlight and a big portion of it, but also just this is like the start of the first like big war, big conflict that we're seeing, and first of many, as we know. And there's just so much there, and there's going to be even more to unpack later on. And I also just want to give a shout out to Michael K. Brennan and the God Form Assumption of Starkrow the Wise, and it's just such a great book. Definitely check it out. And supernatural encounters and this just work so well together, and they just make the story just enhance it even more.
Like peanut butter and jelly.
Exactly
together. Any other thoughts? Ken, Crow,
Ken, do you have
Alfred?
something? Ken or Brendan, do you
I
have
have
something?
to say, the Starcrow stuff, absolutely phenomenal. I loved it. I love me some evil, like dark side cults, but I gotta save all my energy for like chapter 38. That one thing, Marcel probably knows what it is.
I don't.
Okay,
I will
well
look up
then
for it.
you're probably gonna just like freak out because I have
Is it
to
the thing you told me?
Yes.
Okay,
it is.
just make
He
sure.
told me too.
Yep. So I've been silent. I have to like conserve my energy because I got a big rant for the next.
He's very excited.
Yep. But otherwise, this is a phenomenal book, and I think this book in particular is the highlight of SE for me. Is this barring the one reference so far? Yes, barring the one big massive reference that I'm going to get into later. This whole book has been absolutely phenomenal. Big shout out to Joe for just making like everything. All you guys were talking about the connections earlier, and some of them very well, like they're Easter eggs. They're just there for look, it's this thing from this franchise. But like I said, the big thing I'm going to talk about, that how it's written and how Joe portrays it, that very well like works in the continuity of the expanded universe. So
great, can't wait.
Overall,
like you said, some of the references are kind of like eye candy to just like point and go, I know that.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
then some of it really serves the story in such important ways. Sorry, Ken, did you have anything else to add to that?
Not really. Said my piece. So, Al, do you want to go next?
Brennan, was that
or
all
Brennan?
you had?
I was just gonna say the controversy surrounding SE, like where people talk about like, is it canon? I just think it's a disservice to not read it. It's not for everyone, but give it a try.
100%.
You're depriving yourself of some really good stuff here if you don't at least open it and try it out. And so I would say to everyone, give it a shot. You might not think it's canon. You might not think it's part of the EU. You might think it is. You're just like waiting to read everything else first. Just open up the pages and give it a whirl. I think that
I tried that, Brennan, and my eyebrows burned off. So.
I just think you're depriving yourself of really a master piece of literature here if you don't just give it a try, regardless of where you stand. You know what I mean?
After I finish reading Supernatural Encounters, I'm going to tear out each page and consume it.
Just eat it.
Dark ritual.
Is that how you're going to achieve your god form? Just
Yeah.
power?
My god form assumption of Markro the wine. Actually, that's what I've been doing all night with wine.
I mean, it is kind of cult-like because with the intro that I made for the interview me and Marcel did with the artist, I put like candles in front of the books in a dark room, and then like blew out the candles and let the smoke go up between the books. So we were really on to kind of like this this like
I love it.
I don't know.
Now I'm just gonna write an article saying that Supernatural Encounters corrupts the youth. So
yes. With all of this year, we're all an adult now.
It's Dungeons and Dragons for the 2020s.
Yeah, Satanic Panic with Supernatural Encounters.
Nothing better than corrupting the youth.
Local man ruins everything.
First it was Socrates, then it was Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, and now it's Joe Bongiorno. It's a clear line of tradition throughout the ages. How about you, Al? Any final thoughts?
I feel like I got most of it out during the panel, but I want to start a new tradition here, if you'll allow me.
Sure.
I want to get that audience participation up. So here's my question for the audience: where are you putting this book? Seriously, where are you put in chronological order at the very start? Are you going to put it in a little case to like on a pedestal like I'm going to do because I'm smart? Where are you putting it? Where is it going to go? Is it going to have to like be locked in a chest because you fear its power?
Yes.
Tell us all about it.
You know what's funny is that I just recently saw the newest Hellraiser film in the Le Marchand cube, the Hellraiser cube. It's like this rich guy keeps it like on a pedestal in like the middle of this like atrium that he has in his rich mansion. I was just like, that's what I'm going to do with Supernatural Encounters. Put it on a glass encased pedestal. Okay, well, hopefully, you know, we hear from the audience and put it in the comments, where are you putting this book, or how are you storing it? You know, are you lining your walls with biblical script and trapping it in that room so that its eldritch power cannot escape? Let us know. I said that I didn't have a final thought, but I do. I'm going to drink this last swig and say, oh, we already have an answer. So he's putting out the essential. I mean, like, that makes sense to me because it very much is a reference guide in a lot of ways. But again, I do see a clear narrative in this, right? So it's a story as well as a reference guide.
That's why I'm gonna put it between Dark Nest and Legacy of the Force. At least when I get mass market paperback editions.
Difference.
Yeah,
I think I'm gonna put it before Dawn of the Jedi, at least as of now. Or it genuinely might have to end up.
I'm actually going to burn my entire EU collection and just use, like, I'm going to adorn like the ashes around Supernatural Encounters to trap it in a key of Solomon so that it can't escape.
It makes perfect sense to put it before Dawn of the Jedi, but why I personally wouldn't is I feel like that's all told in like past prose.
Right.
Like, this is what's happened. So
that's
like,
why I asked the question, to be honest.
Yeah.
We have.
I mean, it's an it could be a whole video in and of itself. Sorry, Mike.
I just want to throw out there, we've been graced by another editor of Supernatural Encounters, Edward. He puts it on a pedestal beside statues of Abeloth, Onrai, Typhagem, Kor, Danar, Vitiate, et al., surrounded by candles and glowing holocrons. That is amazing. That's, so my final thought was, I was very intimidated when I read the first part of book 4. And discussing it with all of you, I feel so much less intimidated now. I feel like I've just come to understand it better. That's why I think, like, if you're ever struggling with a text, like in school or whatever, book clubs are the way to go, because you learn so much more just by talking it out with people.
Absolutely.
So on that note, you know, thank you all again. I know this one went like an hour longer than we usually do, but book 4 is just like, we thought book 3 with the creation myth was dense, but like book 4, it's just it's that
something
on
else.
speed. Yeah, it's that on speed. So again, we're going to be back, I think, next week with the second part of book 4. So please join us. For now, we're going to get our chubbies out of here. Thank you again, and see you next time.
Bye.